Oh Myriad, you precious apostle is about to destroy his little soul. How can I resist when I just got another job level? I'm so close I can taste it, Myriad. I want this so bad. To finish this as fast as humanly possible, obviously. Don't get me wrong, I love being a big old world killer, and all but being on a single job for too long is bad for my mental health. I need to expand out and take more until I've used up every option I have, and at the low cost of some intense pain, I can make that soon. That's what knowing the soul mages is for. If I wind up a little bit hurt, then so be it. For now, I'm happy to push it to the limits. Happy may have been a strong word. As he increased the volume he took in, the pain only exploded compared to what he had been going through, but it was worth it to get that progress. Once he finished his current one, he'd be able to cheat his way through every other job he held in a single day, so long as he didn't have any more third-tier ones hidden in his list, and even those would only increase the time it would take by a couple weeks at most, given he'd awakened soul production and raised his total mana by so much. He was practically on the edge of clearing his list and being free of putting himself through that sort of pain forever. Even when he'd gain new options in the future after, he'd likely be able to finish them without touching his coat for it. Meaning if he could put up with just a bit of pain now, then he'd be free of it all the sooner, trading it in for massive amounts of power. Just the thought made him want to drool as he imagined all he was going to get, making any pain he was currently dealing with worth it for the long-term growth and potential while his imagination went wild, no matter how much his god may have disapproved. What's up, man? The cube's train of thought had shifted away from his apostle's nonsense as he muttered to himself, seeming like he'd accidentally let Ben hear his thoughts more than anything else in a way that gave him no choice but to ask, ending up completely taken off guard by the answer. One of my believers just died. Oh, shit man, I'm sorry, He wanted to ask if it was someone he knew, fearing it could be one of the few he considered either a friend or close acquaintance, but held off on asking, not wanting to be insensitive. Ben knew his god spent more time with the people who gave him faith than was normal for his contemporaries, meaning that it was the death of someone Myriad actually knew, and probably quite well. Myriad was able to pick up on those feelings, though, answering what Ben left unsaid. This tale has been unlawfully obtained from Royal Road. If you discover it on Amazon, kindly report it. Okay. But are you okay about this? This is the first believer you've lost since your planet, right? I mean, you seem like you're handling it pretty okay. But if you need to talk, complicated how? Choosing to have the slightest bit of tact, Ben didn't make any comments about whether his god had eaten the guy's soul, instead focusing on the finer bits of what that meant. So he became a part of you? Okay. And that's interesting and all, but what exactly does that mean? How much are you now this guy? You don't seem to have changed in any immediately obvious way. Okay, but that's not exactly the same as my alien thought structure. I don't become the people I connect to. You now must have memories of an entire life on this planet along with the people this guy was close to. Does that not feel weird at all? Okay. Since you seem chill about it, I'm not gonna push, but is there any big change that comes with this I should know about? Anything you should maybe tell Sakhel or Valeria that they can spread to the other believers? You know what I'm about. If I cared, I wouldn't have worked so hard to trick those two into taking those roles. I feel like I just heard something interesting. What do you use your soul for? That's not an answer. Or you could tell me now? Oh, come on, why not? Don't tell me this is another piece of info you jerks keep from mortals. Good golly, Myriad. What sort of guy do you think I am? Ugh, you're the worst. But motivating. The sooner he became a god, the sooner the ones he knew would stop playing so coy about things, adding just a bit of extra motivation for him to strain his soul even further, wanting to finally get over his current job and one step closer to his impossible goals. Oh God, this hurts so much. There really is no kindness in this universe, Ben complained, feeling a pain deep in his core that was completely separate from any of the nerve endings within his flesh, getting no sympathy from his girlfriend beside him. You deserve this, she said in a sing-song voice, not able to muster many feelings for a suffering of his own creation. You seem bound and determined to damage your soul. You literally knew this could and would happen if you weren't careful. Ugh. I was hoping I'd just get another level of soul expansion instead of going the opposite direction. Quiet you. So how bad is it then? Thera sighed, wanting to know the extent of the damage to his soul, even if she couldn't help but get silence at first. Ben, tell me already. A 10% decrease to both my mana and vitality. Yeah, we're going to see Yuzu if we can find her. Sure, but later. You know we've got our priorities today. I kind of wish you'd treat your soul like it was a priority. Hey, it's not like I'm taking in any more mana right now, and it will heal on its own eventually, so there's nothing to worry about. Besides, you know I've been waiting for this. There's no way I'd cancel. Fine, but when we're done I'm dragging you out to them. I swear, half of the reason you want me to become a soul mage has to be so you'd have one around. There's lots of good reasons to want you to become a soul mage. I'm not turning my nose up at any of them. Now come on. This is going to be exciting. He tried to keep his complaints to himself from there as he dragged her along through to the gate network. After all, that was a very special day for him, and he didn't want to keep Thera thinking about something that really was due to his own poor planning when it should have been so exciting. The gods' time to pay up had finally come, and they were going to get to see the mythic items of the world. Tools that were seeing constant use due to the need to slaughter the demons who had made their way into the world along with whatever other uses they might be put towards. He may have only known about a couple already, but he was more than prepared to examine them all in whatever detail he could, nearly quivering in anticipation by that point as he just imagined what he'd get to see as they went through their first gate to the dwarven city beyond and made their way to what looked to be a castle. Huh? Myriad, I'm literally always polite 100% of the time though? Genuinely so hurtful that you think so low of me. It will be fine. While his god despaired, the two made their way up to the castle doors, Ben displaying the relevant details of his card to the castle guards. Apostle Ben, here for a prearranged meeting. He told them and was led inside without incident after that, with the one standing out front expecting him as he was led within, deep into the castle's heart until they were standing before a throne, the king of that dwarven nation before them. Bearing the slightest consideration for what Myriad had told him, Ben at least gave a small bow, trying to make a decent impression. It's a pleasure to meet you. I am the Apostle of Myriad, Ben Hef, here to enjoy the honor of viewing your nation's great treasure along with my companion, Thera Oris, daughter of Analia's queen, Pelenia Oris. It is our pleasure to be here. Ha, the pleasure is mine, Apostle Ben, the dwarf said, giving a nod. I've heard much about you. One of my countrymen was even lucky enough to witness your first awakening, and more have benefited from your help to achieve their own. If you discover this tale on Amazon, be aware that it has been stolen. Please report the violation. The way he said, first awakening, made Ben wonder how many that king suspected he'd gone through but felt no need to push. He was well within Ben's range and there was no malice in his mind. A good sign that things would go smoothly. I remember getting to see what the dwarves put out during the contest. Getting to see their work was a pleasure and helped me immensely in my own work as well. Ah, it's a pleasure to hear it, but rumor has it you've only grown more since then. I don't suppose I could tempt you to visit our city for a few weeks to give some guidance to some of my kin. Again, Ben felt nothing nefarious from his mind, just a genuine desire to help his countrymen grow, earning him a positive response, even if it wasn't going to be exactly what he wanted. While I unfortunately have too much to do in the name of contributing whatever I can to the war effort to give up so much time, in the event we win in the end, I'd be happy to make a visit back for whatever humble guidance I can give. Ha, then another reason to hope for the best in the end. But you're right. I shan't keep you, so let's show you what you came for. Draft? Come forth. A dwarf that had seemed like a simple guard at first glance stepped forth before holding out a sheath, an item that by itself was ranked as being in the middle grade of legendary just for being able to hold the thing it contained as Ben took it and pulled out the sword within. While it would have been a short sword to him, it was a perfect length for the dwarf who wielded it, being an item he'd already heard about from the Grey and was strangely familiar in some ways as well. What he held was a weapon not made of metal but instead the same condensed spacetime that would form around Voidstone, though lacking that very stone at its heart and instead continuing to exist through the power bound to it alone. Beautiful. He couldn't help but mutter as he held it, poring over everything it was in wonder as he made sense of what he was seeing. The item of a proper crafting god. The enchantments bound to it were some of the best he'd seen by that point, beyond even the creations of the magic god Galwax he'd studied and of a better quality than what he or his teacher could pull off, even with the latter taking his own steps into the same sort of godhood. It was the exact sort of thing he'd been hoping to get his hands on as he studied it, forming his ideas and theories as he did. Supposedly a sword that could cut anything, the immediate question was how it was even able to exist in that form, with the answer looking like it was related to the underlying power that existed beneath the enchantments and was imbued within the material itself, an act of some complex bestowal holding it together and letting it exist at the very least and likely strengthening it in other ways he couldn't see, filling Ben's heart with desire once more. God, I want bestowal so freaking bad at this point. I have one enchanter job left to choose from currently. Please, please, please let me get the skill if I take that one. It would mean so much to me. It was a prayer he didn't have much hope for but still couldn't keep himself from feeling with everything he had as he imagined all of the things he might create if he could only get that skill, but did his best to regulate that desire to the back of his thoughts as he focused on the mythic item in his hand. Sitting at the high end of the spectrum, he knew he had to test it. Materializing a lump of iron, Ben tossed it lightly in the air before swinging the sword down, not even feeling as it cut through, like there was nothing there but leaving 2 halves to fall to the floor. Immediately he tried again, materializing mithril that time and applying the strongest defensive enchantments he could create, only to get the same result as he gazed at it in wonder. It was clear why its sheath needed such a ranking. Anything less and the sword was certain to fall through it from the weight alone. Still though, there was more he wanted to try, and he turned to Thera for his next attempt. Could I get you to make a small barrier and fill it with darkness for me? Preferably making both spells as strong as you can, please. She did as he asked, and once more he attempted to cut through, watching both spells dissolve despite the massive power that was put into them with the same ease as everything else, with a flash of annoyance crossing Thera's face for that fact while the sword's current wielder grinned and the king laughed. Not so simple, is it? He asked. Though I'd appreciate some care. It can cut beyond its reach, and I'd rather not have to rebuild my home. Not to worry, I won't pour a drop of mana into this thing. I can imagine that might kill some goodwill. There's just one more thing I want to test. Using a skill the god who made it couldn't have expected that time, Ben actualized a basic board, not bothering to define it down to any molecular level and instead focusing only on its shape and strength as it floated in the air before him before he sliced through, feeling the instant hit to his mind as he did and flinching for the pain it brought. Okay, could have expected that, but it still sucked. Still, good to know I can't count on the skill if I somehow end up on the wrong end of that thing. With his examination and testing done though, Ben gave one more bow before handing it back. Thank you for giving me this time. I deeply appreciate the opportunity to look over such a wonderful item. The thanks belongs to my God for both making it and allowing this meeting, but I have no doubt she appreciates it. I hope we'll enjoy the chance to host you a bit longer in the future. Should the chance come, I'll look forward to your people's hospitality. But for now, there's a few more places we need to be today, so thank you. It was a pleasure. The pleasantries went on only a little longer before the two were able to leave, Ben already excited to get a look at the rest for whatever depths they might contain. After 10 minutes of staring at the second mythic item of that day, Ben finally spoke up. I absolutely hate this thing. Ben! Thera hissed as she elbowed him, far more aware of the priests in the room, even as the one in charge laughed. A not uncommon reaction from those who study it, even if most aren't so honest about their feelings. The worm person and a member of Wedro's race chuckled. Unfortunately, with its maker gone and our surviving pantheon not privy to its secrets, we have no idea what it might be or what it's used for. Vovovnada's final masterpiece eludes us to this day. Another one Quillith had told him about, the item in question was a sphere that floated in the air at his eye level, its length going from his torso to his head, and was otherwise entirely incomprehensible to him. His eyes could tell it was a high mythic item, but that was it. He couldn't see any sort of magic or power on it, only perceiving its shape and the red sheen it held, with the answer as to why that was the case apparent at least as he reached his arm out and it passed through without issue. The item was somehow out of phase with the rest of the universe. Or at least that was his assumption, As much as it annoyed him, he didn't actually know and likely never would unless he somehow grew to a third-tier space mage despite the limitations of his soul to see if he could interact with it on a deeper level. But why wish for the impossible? Maybe if Jake or Uriel manage to awaken to that tier, then I can take advantage of them for a bit for some experiments, but ugh, yeah, this is wholly unsatisfying. Neither his nor Thera's magic could touch it, and if it really was somehow not in line with the standard universe, that might explain why his mana sense wasn't able to pick anything up from it, even if that left the incomprehensible issue of how his eyes were perceiving anything either. But despite the fact he had to call it his loss as he failed to get anything worthwhile from it, he still had one question. So, if it can't be interacted with in any way, then how did you guys manage to get it here? And by here I mean to this planet, unless your gods can interact with it in a way mortals can't. Oh no, they're as lost as we are, and while our surviving pantheon aren't gods of craft like Vovovnada was, even the crafting gods of this world looked it over without finding a solution either. No, there's actually a bit of a trick to moving it, though it hasn't given us any more hints that can help. If you completely enclose it, then you can transport it. That's how we've moved it whenever we've had the need. Okay. I guess that explains why it doesn't vanish into space as the planet moves. It's less to do with gravity that it is the walls around it. No, it's not like it floats off when we take it outside either. Yeah, I really hate this thing. Mind if I try it at least? Be my guest. Materializing a thin layer around it, what he'd created didn't phase through it like the rest, instead just floating there with it, letting Ben push and pull the entire item with ease while using every sense he held to try and find a change, coming up empty in the end. Whatever rules it played by were completely foreign to him, and as much as that left him annoyed, it also left him in agreement that whatever it might have been, the mysterious item had to be a masterpiece. So knowing there was nothing else he'd be able to get from it at that point, he gave his thanks and said his goodbyes as he and Thera left, walking off to their next destination through the gate network. Ben, please don't tell people you hate their sacred artifacts, Thera sighed. Just because he agreed doesn't mean it couldn't have been an issue. Yeah. Sorry it just slipped out. I'm on my best behavior though, won't happen again. He did his best to ignore the look of distrust at that statement while they went through to the next gate to another kingdom, heading into the Church of the Sirens' surviving pantheon and finding a warm welcome as they went. A crowd of priests gathered in wait and bowing the moment they entered. The narrative has been stolen. If detected on Amazon, report the infringement. Myriad's apostle, it's a pleasure, the bird woman said in good cheer. And Miss Thera, you may not remember me, but we met briefly when you were younger. I am Wazin, High Priestess of Telenin. Please, follow me. Ben could tell Thera had absolutely no memory of the woman and was trying to hide that fact, especially since it was likely the truth. As the second largest group on the planet with an innate charm magic, the two countries had long been allied, as had every race that possessed an unfortunate passive ability. The fact that the Sirens could walk around Analia without needing to be cloaked though meant more than a few would travel there back before the advent of the resistance braces, and even there in their homeland, he could see the priests of the church wearing them. He could tell from the High Priestess's thoughts that she knew who he was and the part he'd played in their creation, trumping the fact that she also knew him as the Mad Apostle and leading to the bright reception while they were led back to a tightly locked door, guards standing by in front of it as they went through to what waited beyond. The room could be described as largely simple, even if there was no reason for it not to be. Aside from the picture of the god gracing one of the walls, Ben imagined it was likely the dead one who had created the item to begin with. The only other thing was the item itself, painting a familiar picture. Once more, Ben was looking at a floating sphere, though this one was larger than him as it hovered over the ground and was constantly pulsing with mana, lines of the stuff shooting and swirling across it for all affinities and the non-affinitied as well, catching his interest as he looked, even if that wasn't his only thought. Sure hope floating balls isn't going to be a trend. It was one he kept to himself though, bearing in mind Thera and Myriad's requests that he try to be polite as he asked the obvious question now that he was faced with one the Grey hadn't told him about. Through his eyes, he could see it was lower mythic and it was named the Great Puzzle of Elatar, but nothing else. So then, what does this do? We don't know, Wazin told them honestly. Elatar died without revealing its purpose to either us or the rest of his pantheon. It is unfortunately one of our great mysteries. Okay, I'll take as many flying balls as this world wants to offer so long as their purpose being lost to time isn't also going to be a trend. It was a feeling that must have slipped through to his face as well, with the high priestess giving a light giggle. It may not be known to us, but at the same time it's not like we have no idea either. Elatar was a god of puzzles and pride. We're sure that this is in essence a challenge from him. The hardest puzzle he could create, waiting all of these years to be open to see what mysteries it contains. Of course, you're more than welcome to try it yourself. Can I? Of course, feel free to run your mana through it in different ways to see how it reacts. As far as we can tell, we've had no success yet, but perhaps today will be the day. Instantly he had his hands on it, running his mana through it and creating the other types he needed through his rings to try and see how it would react, watching as the mana that danced across the surface warped and changed each time, reacting to what he put in with patterns he couldn't immediately understand, even as he did his best to categorize them. Each reaction spawned another reaction to interact with, but the biggest issue was that it didn't all happen in the same place. That puzzle was huge, but certain inputs resulted in outputs happening beyond his reach and potentially even beyond his eyes, with him looking to fix that issue at the very least. Sorry, but could I get you two to stand on different sides of it? I want to try and see a bit more by borrowing your eyes. Wazn didn't ask further questions despite what he expected, and both she and Thera moved as he asked, looking at the item with their own mana sense while he interacted with it, even if that still left some struggles. While Thera's mana sense had improved dramatically since her various awakening and levels, Wazn's was far weaker, making him struggle to use her eyes at the level of efficiency he wanted despite it seeming mostly good enough. The mana being produced was powerful enough that it shouldn't have been difficult, but it seemed her ability to perceive the fire affinity was particularly abysmal, weakening that aspect of her sight enough that Ben eventually had the two switch places while repeating inputs to try and understand where it fell short as he tried to make his models, feeling annoyed by the end as he reached his conclusion. He couldn't solve it. The second mythic item in a row he couldn't figure out, and the third he'd seen that day so far. It didn't feel like a great sign for things to come as he slumped over in his defeat, even as he kept mentally going over all of the inputs and outputs, hoping something might click eventually until he inevitably gave up, forced to deal with another mystery he couldn't solve. All right, looks like your puzzle god wins another day, he eventually sighed. Thank you for your time, though. It was still interesting to attempt. If you ever feel like giving it another try, you're more than welcome. She nodded. The doors of our church will always be open for the Apostle of Myriad. You doing okay, Ben? It's impossible to overstate my disappointment. How did the gods let two of the world's small supply of mythic items remain mysteries for all of these years? It kind of feels like it could have been, I don't know, not a priority, but at least somewhere on the list of things worth figuring out. What if there's something useful? I swear to God, if any of the other ones that are left are some forgotten mysteries too, then I'm going to go insane. Well, at least we're almost done. That's actually another entire issue in and of itself. He knew that there weren't many mythic items in the world, at least not things that were truly items. While the trials of the world's various gods may have technically counted, when it came to things that could be held in one's hands or at least kept in a room, the number was only 10. 9 when one accepted that Inox was never going to get a new body that existed at the same scale as his last one. It was something he hadn't been aware of before their outing to see them all either, but it did put in perspective how lucky he was to have his hands on the archive, creating a small reason for him to hold off on any destructive urges the next time he felt angry at Galwax for something. But despite that low total, it wasn't like the ones currently on the planet were the only ones to ever exist either, with it really being a matter of the gods who had made such things not necessarily having had the chance to save them. Who could guess how many wondrous items had been lost or destroyed with their planet's conquests, not to mention the idea that any might have fallen into the demon's hands. All of it culminated into what was becoming a slightly disappointing day, at least so far, but he tried to keep positive as they went to their second-last destination out by a coast. Unlike with the ones they'd already gone to see, when it came to the items of the aquatic races, it wasn't so easy for them, given their need for air and all, resulting in the few that group had being brought to them and leaving the two to wait for them to arrive. Nor was it long. After only a few minutes of enjoying the breeze and the sea air, they began to notice ripples in the water, the forms of hundreds sitting just beneath its surface while dozens more came out, members of semi-aquatic races being sent to act as guards while Ben got his look. with 4 of them coming out and holding the items with care and reverence, showing each one the respect they'd give the gods who made them. Apostle Ben, one in the lead, spoke, a being with the common octopus body plan with the specific species unknown to him. I understand that this is a reward for your work, but I hope you understand we'd like to make this quick. Taking these items so far from their homes and where they can do the most good has made more than a few nervous. Of course, I have no interest in holding you up so long as I can examine them and ask a few questions. It's just the 4. It is. He waved a tentacle at the first, bringing forth an item that by all accounts looked like a simple pole if not for the dense magics placed on it. This one in particular we'd prefer you didn't run your mana through though, for all of our sakes. Okay, why? Is it a weapon? He asked as he carefully took it, looking it over and memorizing the structure of it to the best of his abilities while trying to push his material sense to see if he could find anything deeper to it, all while the octopus shook his head. The opposite. This was a tool originally made to aid in farming. As I understand it, the world this item was made for had a type of fish that was particularly suited to act as livestock, with the only issue with them being how slow they would reproduce. This item brings a multi-year incubation period down to a matter of days, though there are some issues with it due to the fact that its effect extends to any animals. Gotcha. I can see how that could potentially cause some havoc if any sort of pest got within range. Well, yes, there's that too, but it's not exactly the main concern. Then what is? This is a pre-system artifact. In this case, animal just means any form of life that wasn't the creator's original race. Any will feel its effects, and most aren't interested in so casually having their fertility and gestation rates enhanced so severely. Okay. Well, I've seen all I need to, so you're free to take that one back and far away for now, thank you. An interesting item, and he wasn't going to fault the god who made it for that oversight when there was no way they could have reasonably predicted the turn their race's fate was going to take, but he got the distinct impression that no matter how good its uses had to be for feeding the aquatic part of the world, it was making the people around him more uncomfortable than anything else they had, and he couldn't deny that he didn't want something like that going off in his hands either. Thera had also backed up with that explanation and only came back once it was gone, looking far more comfortable once it was out of sight, even if she asked a question of her own. And what exactly is its range? About a few hundred meters in all directions. If you discover this narrative on Amazon, be aware that it has been stolen. Please report the violation. And how long does its effect last? It varies by species, but in general a couple days. But don't worry, you'd be able to feel if you were under its effects. MMH. Still looking far more concerned than she had been a few minutes ago. With that one gone, they moved on to the next, carrying over the second item. This one took 2 to carry, and by its look was largely shaped like a tree, with branches stretched out of the top and curving, swirling offshoots as he examined it, trying to get a sense for how it worked from what he was seeing of the enchantments on it alone and coming to something of a conclusion. Does this act on the surrounding water around it? In part. One carrying it answered. The gentle breath adjusts the environment around it for optimal growing and living conditions for the crops and people of Johto, though the conditions it creates are largely favorable for a majority of the peoples in the deeps. The water temperature remains consistent and the overall quality and cleanliness improves in droves where it's activated, and the ground quality is improved too for plants to grow. With a radius of 1 kilometer, it keeps the city that houses it rather comfortable. Would that basically be some sort of terraforming tool then? Or I guess aquaforming might be a more accurate description, but either way, it's an item that modifies a fair chunk of the environment. Neat. I'm sure they'll want this back as soon as possible, but let's make sure to give it a good look over first then. He happily went over it, asking the 2 who held it to move and twist it as need be to let him get the full view of everything that made it up while pouring in mana here and there to see how it would activate, ensuring he had as perfect of a mental model as he could by the time he was finished, and let them carry it back to begin its trip home, leaving only 2 more to go as the next one was brought forth, letting him see what was by all accounts a trident. Now this is an aesthetic I can get behind. Let's give it a look. He carefully took it as he looked it over, examining the magic bound to it, with one thing becoming abundantly clear. Its entire purpose was to hold power over water. It couldn't have been more obvious, and it could be nothing less than a tool for war, making Ben wonder if the history of the world it originally belonged to held an evil god as he took it all in. Unlike others, there wasn't actually much to ask. He could understand the enchantments with ease. The only thing he couldn't replicate was the incredible density of them or the bits of divinity the tool held, but he could still make predictions as to what it could do. It wasn't like a staff, all magic would be coming from it. Not the wielder, so even he could have taken advantage of it if he wanted, and it wasn't hard to predict the scale it would act on. After asking first, he activated it, pulling water from the air itself instead of the sea and watching as it gathered more and more without any sense of strain to imply it might not be able to handle it, even as it stretched out tens of meters above him. He was sure it could manage significantly more too. The only reason he stopped was out of consideration for the people around him who were only growing more nervous as he went, all of them breathing a comfortable sigh as he forced all he'd gathered back into the air itself instead of just dropping it. If it was so strong above the water, then he could only imagine how powerful it would be below. He could easily envision creating whirlpools or increasing water density at a scale that could kill an army, or else just ripping all of the moisture from their bodies to end things. Hell, you could use this to manipulate the properties of water as well to a big enough extent that the things within it would just dissolve. Okay, this is officially as cool as the space sword. It was only once he was sure he'd gotten all he could from it that he handed the item back, feeling far more satisfied with what he'd seen so far compared to the last two land options as he went to look at the last aquatic one, finding something that looked both more simple and humble than the others. Sitting only at the low end of mythic, the final one in that stop was shaped largely like a steamer basket. It may not have been made of wood, but the size was right, and it had two levels to it that could both be accessed, while the magic it held was largely a combination of light, life, and death, arranged in a way that left Ben unable to immediately guess its purpose, forcing him to ask, "So what does this one do then?" While unfortunately small, this is a healing chamber. As long as one still has any life in them and is of a race small enough to fit, any wound or illness can be healed by placing them in here. Wait, really? So it can be used for two at a time then? And how long does it take to work? Healing items in general were on the rarer end, so it couldn't help but catch his curiosity as he looked it over while he got his answers. It can usually finish up in minutes, but it only does one at a time. The lower compartment is for raw materials. In the case of the loss of flesh or limb, the injured will be put in the top while mass to pull from will be placed in the bottom to help reconstruct them. Okay, makes sense since this planet is pretty lacking in items that can materialize, but I wonder how it does that. Even typical healing spells require some flexibility from the caster. It's part of the reason items like this aren't common, so does it examine the person it holds somehow. While I'm by no means an expert on the subject, from what I understand it reads the information held within the soul of the one it's healing, though I couldn't tell you anything more than that. Okay, a pretty clever solution, even if hard, Ben muttered. He could understand the theory behind it. The soul was a record of everything a person was. On top of holding the basic skills and experiences of a person's life, it also held memories for sure, and while he wasn't positive on it, with everything else he wouldn't be surprised if it somehow recorded the makeup and structure of the vessel that contained it. One thing he was becoming more and more aware of was the depths of complexity a soul could hold, which only showed him that despite being able to create them himself, he still had more to learn. But to use the information stored on a soul to facilitate how a spell is cast, that's an idea, isn't it? Just thinking about it left him feeling more and more inspired as a certain prospect filled his thoughts. A direct application of that for some of his own work that was threatening to make him want to run off then and there, only stopping himself from a quick return to Stonewall because they still had one more place to go. The people around could pick up the change in him, the rising excitement in a way that seemed to put a few on guard that only dropped as he handed the final item back. Okay. Well, thank you all for your time. It's been a pleasure, but it looks like we've got to hurry for our last appointment, so I'll let you all go. He was already dragging Thera along as he said it, eager to get his last visit done to see if he could put his new bit of inspiration to the test. Flying through the sky on a slab of earth beneath them, Ben paid no mind to the speed Thera was moving them as he instead was lost in his thoughts, with that only being broken as Thera spoke up. Ben, you're basically vibrating. What's going on? Just got something I want to test really, really badly when we get home. If I'm right, I might be able to make something cool. We're still trying to see Yuzu or Elvit first to get your soul fixed. Ben. You seriously can't just be living like this. Okay, true, the sooner I get it fixed the sooner I can comfortably overfill it again. I'm patient. I can wait. No, the point of getting healed isn't to immediately start doing the exact thing that injured you again. God's above, Ben. You're being a healer's worst nightmare. Hopefully it's only going to be another week and then never again. Okay. I don't promise, but I'm real hopeful about my prospects of that being true. Consider me not reassured but okay. And we're almost there. They could see the final destination in the form of a walled city in the distance. Similar to Stonewall in that sense, the size seemed comparable enough from the distance too that it may not have been correct to call it a city, but if that was what its people referred to it as, then that was all that mattered. It was the only place they were visiting that wasn't on the gate network, necessitating the trip out. Different from Stonewall, though, was the look of it. He didn't think the wall he was approaching was any less practical than the one of his home, but a far greater effort had gone towards the aesthetic of it, ensuring it all was made of a brilliant white stone with the few buildings he could see within being the same. It wasn't long until they landed, walking the rest of the way as some guards at the gate gave them both a quick look over before waving them through, letting them make their way over to the larger building sitting at the city's heart and passing its people along the way. The two of them certainly stood out as they went. It didn't seem like the sort of land where outsiders not belonging to its main species would appear, but the species itself was familiar, with the people looking largely human except for elephant-like ears, all of them being the same race as Vasta. They ignored the stairs they got through, focusing on getting through that final destination as they arrived at the main church and let themselves inside, finding a few priests already waiting, even if they looked none too pleased compared to the rest they dealt with that day as Ben greeted them. Hello there, Apostle Ben, here to look at your mythic item. I believe you've been expecting me? MMH. Come so we can get things over with. No warm welcome. They were led through the church while Thera gave him a questioning glance. Not that he had anything helpful to add. He was already reading their minds to try and see what the issue was, but it seemed they and their god viewed some of his actions, including the one that had gained him his Mad Apostle title, in a rather negative light and painted their attitudes as they went. But if they were just going to be grumpy instead of outright hostile, then he didn't particularly care. He didn't need to get along with them, he just needed to see what they had and got exactly that as they were led through a back door, getting to watch another priest practicing with the most interesting of staves he'd gotten to lay his eyes on by that point. Quillith had told him about it in the past. The item not only having the incredible effects of increasing the strength of any light magic passed through it, as well as the even better one of actually helping to increase the wielder's proficiency with that particular magic as well in the process. But the staff itself had supposedly been made of light. This narrative has been unlawfully taken from Royal Road. If you see it on Amazon, please report it. It was something he couldn't wrap his head around, even as he looked at it, appearing mostly like glass until a burst of mana went through it to make the entire thing glow. It didn't look like the two examples of energy beings he'd encountered in the past, but given it wasn't a living thing, perhaps that was to be expected, and he patiently waited to get his hands on it for a closer look, with the priests around him and the one currently using it looking like they didn't want that to happen. The one continued to practice with it, acting like he wasn't there until he eventually forced the issue. Ahem. I personally don't mind waiting a bit if there's a reason, but you should have all been informed I'm here to examine the staff. Seeing as how that should really only take a few minutes, maybe half an hour tops, the sooner you let me, the sooner I can be on my way. Still looking unhappy about it, but at least keeping their composure, the one in charge nodded, directing the one who used it to hand it over, no matter how unwillingly it was, as Ben finally got it with his grasp. He could tell from his material sense that even if it wasn't really made of some strange structure of light, it was very much something outside of that reality's normal periodic table, and he briefly wondered if that sense alone would give him enough information he could process to try and materialize it before dismissing the idea as something he might be able to manage with a little more information, though not something he could maintain the existence of. Much like the space-time sword he'd already gotten to see, there was magic both enchanted on it and bestowed within it, all of it working together to both hold its existence as well as allow for its powerful effects, and he did his best to take it all in. Having a smooth texture while being far lighter than he'd expected. He couldn't deny there was a beauty to it, something that made him want to try and put his own spin on such a thing if he could as he tried to use it, passing a bit of his non-affinity power through it to materialize a few souls and feeling as it worked, with the item's nature not inhibiting its ability to act as a proper staff for anyone to use if there was a reason for it. That wasn't an unreasonable design, of course, especially if it didn't hinder its main functions. As useful as light magic could be for those who held it, there were simply times when other options would be better depending on the particular need. He couldn't deny that it was an excellent piece, well worthy of the ranking as something that sat at high mythic, even if a small thought couldn't help but pass his lips. So incredible. But what a shame. And what exactly do you mean by that? One of the priests asked, his tone demanding Ben apologize and retract his words but not getting it as he instead explained far too honestly what he'd meant. After seeing them all, this has to be one of the better mythic items this planet has, he told them, still keeping his eyes glued to it and largely blind to everyone else as he more or less thought out loud. And I can see to an extent why you'd have a 9th level light mage using it right now. I'm sure this is an excellent tool to help people awaken, even if it just lowers the difficulty a bit, but he's really not the best person to be using it in wartime, is he? I mean, you may not have heard this, it's pretty recent, but there's currently a contender for a 9th level 2nd tier light magic who would be significantly more valuable to get whatever help this could give, right? Plus the 2 archmages currently on the planet that are trying to get to the 3rd tier. Even if it's not applicable to all they could cast, this still works as a regular staff, so if it helps with even a single aspect of their magics, then that might be all they need to get their awakening. But even those 3 are still probably not the best options because let's all be real here, this increases the power of the light magic run through it. No matter how valuable awakening anyone could be, what that really means is that this should be in the hands of the great light spirit so she can dash. His words were cut off by an elbow to his ribs, Thera pulling his eyes and shaking her head before he noticed the priests there staring murder at him for everything he'd said, no matter how correct it was. He wasn't getting anything from their thoughts except naked rage either, so if there was a story there it was one he'd need to get from another source, while he instead accepted that his time was up as he quickly handed it back over. But anyway, don't mind my little rambles, he told them, already dragging Thera along to avoid any trouble. Looks like you're all busy, so we'll show ourselves out. Thanks for the time. Ignoring the daggers being stared into his back, he was happy to finish up anyway. To get to look at such an interesting tool genuinely was a gift regardless of however the owners or makers of it saw him, but he had ideas he wanted to test, so from there it was going to be off to the soul mages and finally back home. Okay, so that wasn't ideal, Ben muttered, still nursing his very sore soul while Thera just shook her head. You know you can't count on the 2 most important people on the planet being free at all times for your beck and call, right? Yeah, but that doesn't mean I can't wish they were. He wasn't able to get any of the strain he'd put himself through dealt with because no matter where they looked, neither Yuzu nor Elvit could be found. The most they'd gotten from the guards at both residences was that the 2 were each off to handle their own work, with when they'd return left as a mystery, the soul mages having responsibilities that needed to be handed. It was an inconvenience for sure, but not an insurmountable one as they stepped back through the mini-gate and into the shop, with Thera giving him a questioning glance. So, it's pretty late. Do you think you'll be home tonight or staying to work? Tonight is for work, sorry. I had an idea after seeing some of those things that I want to test. It's fine. I just better not catch you wearing your jacket when I come by in the morning. Okay. But on the other hand, pretty please? No, Ben, you are not allowed to try and figure out how much damage a soul can accumulate before you permanently break it. Take a break tonight and ask your god if he can help you find Yuzu in the morning. Otherwise, I'm just taking it with me. Alright, you're right, I won't do it. All of my materializing will come from my very own, very humble mana pool. That got her to laugh just a bit. It might be rich coming from me, but I really don't think you should be calling over 5,000 points of mana humble. It feels a little humble when I've been getting used to playing with millions. You'd be surprised at how godlike it's possible to feel through intense levels of pain. Thankfully, none of my skills are so self-destructive. Do you ever feel any concern about the number you have that actually hurt you in one way or another? I mean, it's really only anything that qualifies as a mind skill that's probably fine. MMH? She leaned in to kiss him before pulling away, looking tired after the long day. Well, I'll be by in the morning to make sure none of them have left you a bleeding mess on the ground. See you then, Ben. Good night, Thera. He watched her go, giving it just a moment before getting to work, which started by materializing more souls for what trickle of experience that would give him. As much as he didn't want to slow down for the night, she had been right. It wasn't a good idea to push the limits of damage a soul could take no matter what growth he wanted to get. Which means I need to figure out a way to heal it a bit more reliably for any time I can't find a soul mage. But for now it's time to see if any of my ideas are going to bear some fruit. He went from the shop to his warehouse, pulling out his homunculi to do various bits of work while he got started with his main one to keep the night productive, at the same time making what souls he could while actualizing a small fly to buzz around him to practice that as well, even if it was all background noise in comparison to what pulled the majority of his thoughts. Stolen from its rightful author, this tale is not meant to be on Amazon. Report any sightings. He'd gotten to see a lot of interesting items that day. Some he could replicate to significantly smaller extents and others he couldn't at all, but there was one thing he'd witnessed that could have an immediate impact on the project that was giving him some struggles. The healing chamber that could reconstruct bodies using the information stored within its target's soul. Doing the same thing was probably out of his grasp, at least for the moment, but that mattered less than the realization it inspired in him. Souls could act as stores of knowledge, and he could not only construct souls, but create blank ones that lacked any worldly experience to go with them. In theory, that meant he could bind them to an apparatus and use them as the source of information needed to make materializing through enchanting possible. He'd been wanting to put the idea to the test the second he'd had it, and now that he was back he'd wait no longer, with some bodies already building the item itself while his main one went looking for a piece of rainbow mana crystal, with the ability to make it himself currently locked away by his need to recuperate. It was only when he found one that he materialized a soul within it, and putting his idea to the test, connected with it. Normally when he did such a thing, all he cared about was taking the mana it held. But that wasn't the purpose of the current act. Connect had always been a two-way skill, and even if he typically blocked anything within his head from reaching another for the safety of anyone he linked with, that wasn't a danger to a naked soul, so he gave the thing an experience to be recorded within it, letting it deal with the link as every mind he possessed was thinking of nothing but the numerous properties of rainbow mana crystal in the hopes it would imprint in a way that a memory of sorts would form before eventually pulling away, leaving only to test if he was correct. With the tool that would do the job largely looking like just a box, Ben inserted the crystal into the small divot left for it and began constructing his enchantments, building them up in a way that took as much inspiration from the only item he'd seen that would read a soul as he could while supplementing it with Connect and anything else he thought might work, tying it all into pathways that would take advantage of material manipulation in the hopes that finally, after all of the failed attempts he'd left in the past, that he'd get the progress he so desperately wanted, pouring his mana into the tool to activate it and watching as it worked, a tiny grain of crystal coming into being. Success. Oh, I am so good at what I do. And I really want to complain about how the system ranks items at this point. He was seeing it listed as only middle legendary, which couldn't help but annoy him a bit, all things considered. He didn't have the strictest idea of how it gave the rankings it did, but he knew it took into account how skillfully the item was made, along with both the technique behind it and the actual materials used, but he felt it should have been higher. His technique was unparalleled, and he was using the rarest substance of all in the form of a soul to get a result that nobody else on the planet could manage. Not calling it high felt outright picky at that point. But that's fine because this is just the start, he told himself. Let's see, it really made barely anything at all for this, but for a normal material I'd be able to get a ton. Still, it's good to have a way to produce more rainbow mana crystal on hand in the event I hurt my soul again in the future, and I should be able to increase the output, either letting the item draw more power from more mana crystals or else by letting it pull directly from more sealed souls. MMH, okay, I know what option I'm picking. He could currently get a lot of power from a soul in exchange for a shockingly small volume of rainbow mana crystal and began filling more, modifying the device to make places for the new crystals he was adding with hundreds taking their place, leaving the tool looking bedazzled by the end but giving the result he wanted as he activated it again, and it gave a fistful of the material instead, instantly replacing all he'd just used. Okay, this is good, he muttered to himself as he looked it over. If I was to make this again for any other material, I'd need to set a limit for how much it could make any one time to avoid overfilling and potentially breaking it, but for this one that's not going to be an issue, which means onto the next one and the next test to see if the idea that got this whole thing rolling is even possible. He'd shown he could make materials, now he just needed to see if he'd be able to use it for the goal it was leading to, creating an item that could materialize food to let him feed the world. There was already an issue with attempting that goal then and there in the form of a lack of knowledge. He didn't really know the molecular structures of many foods, but that was a problem for later. When he said he wanted to do it, what that really meant was he wanted to see if he could materialize something that would be as complex, and he already knew something that fit the bill, being the Dryadic seeds he could already create. If he could replicate those, then it really was a completed proof of concept that only needed to be filled in from there with whatever decently nutritious option the gods could find him, and he was already getting to work. Bodies creating a brand new machine while he pulled away some of his recently materialized rainbow mana crystal to fill with a new soul, connecting to it once more to try and fill it with all of the information it needed, even if the total volume had completely exploded from there. He needed to give all of the information on every atom that made it up, the arrangements of the atoms into proteins and enzymes and the DNA equivalent it held, and the further arrangement from there that became cells and tissues and culminating into the end product of a seed, with all the problems that would stem from that. When he materialized them, he was actually creating shortcuts in his head for it. It was likely the only reason he'd been able to get the plant mages of the world to succeed at it with his help as well, given the sheer scale of the information needed, with certain sections being grouped together in his mind with the side knowledge of how much it needed to be repeated again and again as some exceptionally non-lateral ideas were taken advantage of to make that work. If a soul would be able to replicate that was an entirely different question, with the answer being a resounding no when he actually tested it. Okay, not ideal, but that means I'm giving it another go, I guess, he muttered, breaking the crystal to release the soul before creating a new one and trying again, attempting to think at it in a different way but still ending in failure. It was another 10 tries after that until he had to admit it didn't seem like it was going to work, but he didn't let himself get discouraged. He'd already proven he could create a tool that could materialize. That meant a solution had to be possible so long as he was clever enough to find it, and if there was one thing it was clever. If I'm assuming that the issue stems from the way information is being processed when it's being materialized, then it could be as simple as restructuring the process. It will be a lot more complicated to build, but it should be worth it. His bodies were already moving as he thought, rebuilding the tool itself to let the enchantments pull from a far broader pool of souls instead of just the one the first prototypes were pulling information from, and he began creating blank souls one by one to repeat the process, only this time, instead of trying to give each one everything he knew, he was instead dividing the information up between them and building his enchantments to pull from them all in order, working to see how complex he could make any one bit of information as his tests grew and the hours wore on, simplifying more and more until he had his success, but a different issue emerged. By the end, it needed over 1,000 souls to function. The annoyance about that was tied with the smugness he felt about that one making it into upper legendary, finally crossing the threshold for the third time despite the issue that came with it. It wasn't sustainable. He was going to have to be the one who made every single one of those that would ever be made, and it wasn't simple work. Sure, it would get easier when he could wear his jacket again, but that was only to a point, with another issue only amplifying that first one. The seed he could materialize was simple, shockingly so. It had the most basic structure of the Dryad homeworld, and Jagal had even helped simplify it a little more for him while keeping it viable, but that wasn't going to be true for anything else he'd create to act as a food source. If you stumble upon this narrative on Amazon, be aware that it has been stolen from Royal Road. Please report it. Be it plant, fungi, meat, or something else entirely, the cellular structure was sure to be infinitely more complex, meaning the tool would have to house tens of thousands of souls at a time on the low end of the scale, and he'd have to force his knowledge into all of them, one by one. At the very least, each tool would be able to pull mana from the same souls they used for knowledge, and since people didn't eat magic materials, that meant it would in essence be never-ending with how much power each device would have access to, but that wasn't enough to offset the potential labor cost, especially given everything else that he alone could make. Legendary weapons beyond just the realm of the soul enchantments his teacher could add to what he'd make, and the mana bracelets that required created souls to give their power on top of everything else he was responsible for. He was making himself more and more of a hot commodity with all he'd produce, but the more he was responsible for, the more time he'd need to spend, having less overall to put towards trying to awaken deep connection and king of sacrilege. At the very least, that newest project did give some level of training to the first when he needed all of the experience he could get to raise it, but that still left sacrilege as well as his many other skills that he would have wanted to train too, leaving him to slump over as he thought about it. There aren't enough hours in the day, and there aren't enough days in the year to do everything I want to. He sighed to himself, pinching his brow while he thought. Okay, simplify. Is there any way I can try to make each individual soul hold more information? I could try optimizing a bit more, but even if I could knock off 20 or 30 for seed production, that still leaves me needing way too many when I get to the main goal. Ugh. God damn it. Why does biology need to be so freaking complex? He trailed off as he said it, the complaint forming an idea in his head. Why was he trying to make something that was biologically perfect? In the past, when he'd materialized into the stomach of the man who'd come to town to duel him, he'd only created the cells of the seed, the parts that could be digested, but there was no reason he'd even needed to go that far. He wanted to create something that would taste tolerable, and that was still a reasonable goal, but what he was making were in essence wartime rations. They didn't need to be at the level of perfection where Thera or Sakhel could use what he'd produced to create a homunculus or to grow a tree. In essence, they didn't actually need biology. He could strip away their DNA equivalent. There was no reason to materialize a roadmap for the structure of it when it just needed to be digestible, and from there he found more and more he could technically take away. He was sure it would affect the taste in the end, but that didn't matter, and he tried again with his seed once more, striping away everything that didn't matter and creating a new arrangement of components based on what he thought would be most important for nutrition before activating the enchantments, ending with a hand-sized cube of plant matter. The cells locked together but lacking so much of what would allow them to really qualify as life while still being something that both felt like it and would be digestible, letting Ben take a bite and swallow it down. Okay, so this tastes like absolute crap, but that doesn't matter because this was never supposed to be food in the first place. What matters is I totally did it. I made a way for the world to eat. Now I just need to actually get some structures that won't be completely miserable to put in my mouth. He was already sitting down to do that then and there, only stopping as he heard a sound through his gate telling him that someone was in his teacher's shop, and popping his head through saw the Yeti coming back from his own work. Fuck. Perfect timing. Infinite hell's boy. You're going to give me a heart attack. Why don't you ever go home? You know how it is. Busy day, busy life, what matters is I made something cool. Come check it out. No, before that, what did you do to your soul this time? Why's it looking so rough? It's what happens when you shove millions of points of mana through it constantly for days on end. It hurts incredibly, but since I can't currently find the soul mages, that's just life, baby. Okay, no, that's not just life. Idiot boy. Did it never occur to you that the soul smith might be able to help with that at all? No, it did not. Does that mean you can help fix this? I won't be very good compared to the other two, but I'll be a hell of a lot better than just waiting it out. Now take a seat already so I can try to fix this nightmare. His teacher's hands on his back, Ben felt the Yeti's spell working. Even if a little slow while he gave Falk all of the advice he could based on how the soul mages had done it for him any time in the past, as the damage he'd put himself through was eventually undone. Oh, you really are the best, you know that, Falk? And a lot easier to find. Next time I'm just going straight to your factory or asking Nair to point me to you. There really shouldn't be a next time. Alas, some things can't be changed. Ben shrugged, already getting up and walking over to his jacket to slip it on, and began pulling mana into himself all over again, making the number of souls coming into existence around him skyrocket while his teacher sighed. No matter what reason you have for doing that, it really doesn't look good. I'm sure, but it seems mostly safe enough. Sure, I can damage my soul a bit, but as long as I keep getting it healed, there's probably no harm. That probably is doing a lot of heavy lifting, his teacher muttered, silently looking his student over for a moment before shaking his head. But if I can't stop you from doing this, I should at least try and keep the harm down. Give me a few minutes and one of your mithril bands. I'll see what I can do. Staring at Ben's soul as he worked, Falk enchanted on the band, building it up and breaking it down a few times, muttering to himself the entire while as he tried to design a spell for it before ending on something the Yeti was still less than happy with but had to admit was the best he could currently do as he explained it. A bit outside all of the spells I've been working on this entire time, but I tried to bind the one I just used on you as an enchantment. It's not going to be great, but it should lower your odds of needing to see me or a soul mage again to get fixed up so long as you keep things in moderation. Seriously? Falk, you really are the best. I am way too lucky to have you as a teacher. That would be real sweet, boy. If I couldn't see you pull in even more mana into your soul I just worked so hard to fix. Did giving you something to reduce the constant damage you put yourself through make you think it was okay to work even harder? Yes. You're a real unpleasant brat to care about, you know that? It really should only be for a bit, Falk. The more I make, the sooner I finish my current job. If I'm willing to push myself, then I can bring things down to just a few more days and never need to worry about doing anything like this again. You might be reading a pirated copy. Look for the official release to support the author. And you expect me to think that saving a handful of days is worth it? Was it worth working yourself to death to try and reach the 3rd tier? Fine, but if you get yourself hurt being stupid again and you can't get your hands on a soul mage, you come find me. I'll make the time to patch you up. And that's exactly why you're the best. Now, since I've caused you a bit of headache, why don't we trade that in for some pride in your student? Come see what I've managed to make. He dragged the Yeti along to his warehouse before proudly displaying what he'd worked so hard on. His new materializers, going from one to the next to show the entire process of how they'd been created and leaving his teacher to whistle by the end. All right, no matter how much of a pain you might be, boy, I'll admit you impress. Of course, might not be so impressive to your prospective in-laws given the first one you put together is going to threaten the market they have cornered on magic materials. I'm not looking to mass-produce or sell that one, Ben clarified. Abris can already make more than enough for the world's needs, and at this point in the war, increasing the supply isn't going to make a difference, so I don't care. My only focus is making food. It was a response that brought a smile to Falk's lips. And I'm sure it'll be appreciated. You'll have to let me try the final products. Ha! Sure, but be warned, it's probably not going to taste great. For emergencies only and nothing else. Maybe, but enough emergencies happen that they'll be worthwhile far into the future. When you're long dead and nobody else can recreate them, these are going to be some prized artifacts for every person or nation that can say they have one. Same with your mana bracelets. Ha! I've created way too many tens of thousands of them at this point for them to ever really be prized. Ben told him, materializing one in full to emphasize the point. I don't know how far in the future one would need to look for enough of these to go missing or get destroyed for them to become scarce. Ah, but if we win then one day we'll get there, it's just a matter of time. Anyway, you up to anything else or heading out now that you're done that? You could at least squeeze in a few hours of sleep. I'll stay and work. I'm not exactly tired and I can talk to the gods about what other things I can try to materialize tomorrow night instead. Now that I can use my code again, I want to take as much advantage of it as I can. Suit yourself, just try not to immediately damage your soul again in the process. Even if I said to come to me, I'd rather not have you banging on my door in the middle of the night. You got it. Have a good night then, Falk. I'll see you when you swing through in the morning. Ah, not tomorrow, I'm afraid, he admitted, sounding sheepish. I pulled some strings. Seeing as how you made those bracelets and all, and seeing as how every mage on the planet has one, I was able to get a day off myself and Sonia hasn't had one in a while and dash. In that case, stop rambling and get some rest so you can have a nice day with her. Thera's swinging through in the morning, so you don't have to worry about finding me collapsed on the ground whenever you come back through. MMH, you really should try to keep that from being possible in the first place, but alright. In that case, I'll see you the next time I'm through. Hopefully I'll have the next materializer up and running by then, so look forward to it. Hearing the shop door open and signaling that morning came, Ben and all of his homunculi put down their work to turn and smile at Thera, getting a far colder reaction in return. Ben, I'm pretty sure you agreed you wouldn't be putting such an insane level of strain on your soul again until after it was healed. Ah, right, this. You don't need to worry. I got it all fixed up. Not only was Falk able to do it, he was even able to make me a thing to lower the odds of it happening again. He explained, showing off the enchantment on one of his bracelets and letting her relax. Okay. I guess that's good then, as long as you haven't been using it as an excuse to push your soul even harder. Of course you are, she sighed before holding up a hand. Okay. I'm not going to say anything. It's your body and your soul. If you're going to destroy both, then that's up to you. I really do promise that I intend to be done doing this soon. If I keep up this pace, I think it will only be a little over a week until I'm done with this job, and then I'll probably never need to do this again. At least not on anything close to this scale. Plus, I'll be able to swing things to clear out not only my job list but so many others too. Yours, Sonia's, Satchel's, Amy, Jake, Will, Steph. Really most of the people I care about who don't have third-tier options. And even if I can't completely clear out your lists, I'll at least be able to put some good dents in them. Ha! And as much as I appreciate you wanting to help me too, focus on the others whenever you manage it. I literally just took my last second-tier one. It would be a huge waste to get you to help me finish my easy ones. Hell, even working through Master Spirit Mage has been going quick enough that it would be a waste to get your help in finishing it. I should be done in a few weeks tops. Sure, but then you'll be getting a few more, he pointed out. It's probably a normal master job, so you should be guaranteed at least one advanced branch, but if I'm right, and I always am, that's your 5th master job. When you finish it, you'll be getting access to Master of All. That can't be right, she muttered, pulling out her card to give it a glance over while Ben chuckled. Most of them are mage jobs. You can't really say I've mastered everything when I've mostly just been handling a few magic branches. And not even that many magic branches if we're really looking at it. Hey, I don't completely disagree, but that's just how it looks based on the few records of it I've read in the library. One of the people I know got it in the past was even more magic specialized than you, since you at least have Master Adventurer taking up one of your spots. It's actually kind of interesting. No matter how much I've read, I'm still trying to understand some of the details of how the system actually produces jobs. They're all in essence basically just hyperspecific blessings, but it basically creates them when it sees a place where one makes sense to exist and keeps records of them all to constantly compare and contrast against the events and accomplishments within a person's life. But so much of it comes down to a kind of abstract idea of what potential exists within a person's soul and dash. He could have rambled longer, with his interest in the topic he was studying making it easy. Questions only piled up during all of his reading, and while he was getting answers the more he went through, he also knew the system was a thing designed to grow itself, and in the thousands of years since it had been made it had developed plenty of time to do exactly that. Meaning not even Nair could give a complete breakdown of its current structure, which only made it entirely more curious as a whole. But Thera was saved from all of that by a knock on the shop door. Not expecting it, since the place had been closed fairly regularly, acting more as a workshop than a proper store given all of the work Falk had away from town thanks to his high level of skill, Ben at least went to check. If someone needed something simple, then he wouldn't mind whipping up an item for them quickly, but what he got was a familiar figure in the form of his favorite guild receptionist. Onk. Love what you're reading? Discover and support the author on the platform they originally published on. Ah, so glad you're in, Ben, they greeted cheerfully. I don't suppose you could find Thera sometime today before evening to make time at the guild? Cecily is looking for you both. Yeah. I've got her in here right now if she doesn't need to run off immediately for her work. Thera, you got some time or want to go by later? I'll go now. I'll just stay a bit later today to help out. But anyway, what's up, Onk? I believe it would be best to ask Cecily when you talk to her, they said, suddenly subtly trying to avoid Ben's eyes in a way that spoke volumes, even without reading their mind as he made a prediction, feeling all too confident that something he'd been able to avoid until then was rearing its ugly head. Welcome. Come in and take a seat, Cecily told them when they got to her office, looking tired. Have you both been well? Ben, I don't think I've seen you since before the wave. You haven't, but all things considered I've been fine. You've been surviving, Thera told him. That's different from fine. Hey, any day I can walk away from my problems is a largely decent day. Anyway, you doing okay, Cecily? You look tired. Ha! Things have been busy, so do me a favor, and don't make this conversation any harder than I'm already expecting. You've both got a rank 1 quest you'll need to participate in coming up in a few days. I knew it. After all of the time he'd now been a rank 1 adventurer, no matter how little he actually used that qualification, neither he nor Thera had ever actually had a quest looking for them to take advantage of that rank. It was something he'd largely wanted to avoid in the past, even fighting against any time his rank had been raised previously, leading to Cecily's current expectations about how that piece of news was going to go and leaving plenty of room for him to surprise her. "Okay then, what is it?" he asked, not trying to fight against it for once and getting to see some intense gratitude in her eyes for that fact. If he was being honest with himself, no matter what it was, he didn't actually have interest, but anything it might be would be a potential test for himself. If his end goal was to kill a god, then a simple step along the way could easily be taking on a rank 1 quest. In essence, it's a matter of guarding and evaluating a group's combat potential as you all go around to clear out some of the larger known swarms of demons that don't currently have any militaries working on eliminating them. Ideally, you'll be leaving it all to the ones you're watching and trying to look at how they manage as a fighting force. Okay. I'm actually less interested now. Ben, please, you were making things so easy. I'll still do it, he sighed. It's just not the sort of quest I was hoping for. He'd been expecting to be the one doing the fighting, not watching and judging others, but he knew he couldn't easily get out of it when it was viewed as something important enough to drag 2 of the world's rank 1 adventurers to, and most importantly, he could tell Thera was excited despite herself. It was the exact sort of quest she'd been waiting for ever since they'd reached that rank, and even if he didn't think it was worthwhile, it was something she could look forward to and enjoy getting to say she'd done in a time when genuine good news was going to become harder and harder to come by. "So, how long until we need to go for it, and where should we be going?" Thera asked, driven by her curiosity on the matter, while Cecily answered. "You'll be meeting at one of the untamed land gates. I'll mark out which one, at which point you'll be meeting with the other parties acting as supervisors along with the combatants you're to be observing. All of this will be in a week's time and should only be a couple days of work." "And why exactly are we acting as observers?" Ben asked her. "Surely we aren't necessary." "Honestly, I couldn't tell you for sure, but at least part of it is going to be so you can protect them if things go wrong. I trust you both will be able to take care of things no matter how they might turn out." "All right. I guess we'll prepare the best we can and try to get this over with." "So, guess who's being dragged along for some bullshit?" Ben said as he got to the realm that night, finding both Myriad and Hellori at work while Nair was off for whatever reason. "I've been pulled to act as an observer for some rank 1 quest. I don't suppose either of you know anything about it, do you?" "I haven't heard anything on the matter, but I'm not exactly most involved in the affairs of any major guild." "Hellori? Why would I know? I have enough other work to focus on." "Why, what's the quest?" "Some sort of observation thing. Me and Thera, and from the sounds of it a few others, are off to judge some fighting force that's been put together, but if you don't know anything then it's fine. Even if we're going to be watching them fight some demon swarms, with Thera there I don't think it will be that big of a deal." "MH, well, be careful anyway," his god told him. "It still really hasn't been that long since you got back. It will be fine. Anyway, a lot of more important things to talk about. Namely, seeing the world's mythic-ranked items, and I also finished one of my many projects. Mostly, at least, I need some help to really finish it. Then start with the first if you're going to need help later." "What did you think?" "Impressed. Impressed, annoyed, and more than a little exasperated. They were all interesting, and I've already been able to apply a bit of what I've seen to my work, but honestly, the fact that we have not 1 but 2 items whose purposes have been lost to time makes me want to rip out my hair, and seeing that at least one is 100% being mismanaged in a time it really could do a lot of good is literally just as bad. I'm trying to ignore all of that though to instead focus on the bright side. Well, ignoring any quirks of fate that left the creators of some of them too dead to explain their purposes. What do you mean mismanaged?" "Myriad, I think that should be obvious," Hellori sighed, the look in her eyes telling Ben she was in complete agreement. "The staff of Yuhano belongs in the hands of those who'd be able to truly take advantage of it, not one of its maker's believers who's only trying to get to the second tier of all things. I won't deny it's a masterpiece, but Yuhano's brethren who inherited it after they passed are all too hard-headed on the matter." "Yeah, what she said. Why am I always being called out about wanting to be paid when the fate of the world is at stake, only to find out that an item that powerful isn't going to any of the four I would say are best suited to using it? If I'm ever called out about being greedy again, I feel like that's a point that needs to be brought up. To be honest, I was unaware of this. Hellori? It's exactly what you'd expect, she said dismissively. They view it as an artifact of their lost world belonging to their people. Not exactly unexpected given that's true of pretty much every mythic item, but this mismanagement here is really to a disgusting degree. There's been talk about it before up here, but it's largely squashed to avoid turning into some big fight. Of course, we really are past the point where that's a fight we need to be having. Perhaps I'll finally start it in our next meeting. You should, Ben agreed. And, wait, you said its maker's brethren inherited it. That's correct. Meaning he's dead? But otherwise yes. Where's this going? This is going to why the hell are half of the mythic items on this planet made by dead gods. The Archive and Onyx, the two stupid balls, and now this? Isn't the survivorship of these gods way too low? Ben, you have to appreciate the fact that it wasn't just mortals who died when their worlds were invaded, Myriad told him. Those who descended on their believers and were killed, or even some who stayed in their realms but stayed behind to keep fighting while their others took their people to escape and were eventually lost in ways we can't guess at. Plenty of gods have died as well. If they didn't, then I'd say there'd probably be 20 to 40% more in this world than there currently are. Stolen from its rightful author, this tale is not meant to be on Amazon. Report any sightings. Okay, good to know I guess. Suppose it's good to remember that the divine are all also being wiped out among all of the planets too. In the end, we largely share our fate with our people, but enough of that depressing topic. What have you made that you're so excited about then? Oh, that, right? Guys, I'm going to need you to either show me some meat and vegetable cells on the deepest level you can, or else find me a god that would be able to. Preferably the most nutritional ones you can get me, although it might take either some discussions or experimentation to see how much of that I'll be able to preserve. All right, we should be able to find you someone, but why? Are you looking to materialize mass volumes of food to distribute? I suppose when using your coat it wouldn't be unreasonable to think that you'd actually be able to make quantities that could feed the world. No, close but not quite. Although I guess I could do that too if it was necessary. It wouldn't actually be super hard, but that wasn't the reason. Like I said, I've solved one of my goals. You're officially looking at the inventor of the materializer, a tool that can do exactly what it says on the box. You've figured out how to make an item that can materialize? Hellori asked in excitement, pushing past Myriad to get right in Ben's face. How did you manage it, and to what level of complexity can it handle? It took making and trapping some souls to get it to work, and while I could probably technically make something of any level of complexity, the more it is, the more souls it takes, and I have to teach each individual one what to do, so I'm going to modify each one to make them as simple as possible. All I need is some knowledgeable gods to help me out, and then I can get up and out to work. Then wait there. I'll find some who might know and don't hate you and be right back. She was gone before either could say a word, leaving Ben to fill the silence. I feel like mentioning she's looking for ones that don't hate me was a bit unnecessary. You didn't exactly win any friends when you asked to be rewarded with job levels and tricked everyone out of a massive amount of faith. Myself included, I might add. Man, what part of I literally helped save the planet are all of you guys up here not getting? Did you ever consider that maybe it's messed up that I had to resort to trickery to be sure I'd get rewarded and you all still quit before it was done? Why am I thinking about dying for this stupid world again? I'd personally be plenty pleased if you changed your mind on that. PFF, and yet that somehow is only going to change my 99% chance of dying to 100. If I give up and put myself in less danger, I somehow put myself in greater risk. That's only because you're a pessimist. I'd be thrilled if you could somehow turn me into an optimist then. That would be easier if reality itself didn't seem to hate you. If we win and survive in the end, you really should turn your next bit of research to asking if there really is some sort of innate luck to the universe that's previously gone undiscovered. Knowing you is giving me doubts. Sure, if we win and I finish decoding and simplifying the summoning spell, then that can be my next priority. And if there is, then just watch, I'll find a way to beat it. Before you know it, Coins are always going to land on heads around me and fortune is going to come flying my way. It is good to have dreams. Speaking of luck then, any more with finishing your job? Maybe some new levels too. No and no, but I at least think the first should be soon. If I'm not done with World Killer before my quest, I will be right after, all at the low cost of maybe damaging my soul some more. You seriously can't keep that up. Not only can I, but I can officially do it even more without having to worry as much. Falk made me something that should help, and I already wasn't shy about putting it to use. By my estimates, I'll have my next one by tomorrow depending on how I work things, leaving only one more to go. Incredible that you've turned one that should have lasted a normal person multiple lifetimes into one you're on the verge of completing. His god sighed. You really have become a bit too good at finding ways to optimize your existence, even if you're breaking yourself repeatedly to do it. Hey man, you guys can't give the world a path to power and then expect it to go unused. I just happened to try to use it very, very well. They continued to talk while they waited until eventually, Hellori returned with Jagal and another god, giving Ben the chance to learn what he needed to in preparation for the day beyond. Back in the shop, laying the finishing touches on the 2 new materializers he'd made after discussing the topic with the gods, it was finally time to test them as Ben activated both enchantments, with each of them producing a cubic foot of material, one based off of a lost fruit of the Dryad homeworld and the other modeled off the meat of a domesticated creature that had made its way to the planet with their original species, both needing to be tasted and tested as Ben prepared to do exactly that. Starting with the fruit, he simply cut it up to be eaten between him and all of his clones, each one chewing and examining it as he tasted it with many mouths, coming to a simple conclusion. Not great. It wasn't bad, it was something he could eat and stomach and, after an extensive talk with the gods, was sure to be largely nutritious to the majority of people on the planet, but it wasn't good either. It was a single cell, again and again and again, lacking all of the complexity of true tissue and then degraded further as it was simplified. It was, without a doubt, a food that would be worthwhile in times of scarcity but nothing else, with that fact reinforced as he materialized it again with his own power instead of the machine's, using all of the details of it he hadn't been able to include and finding that even if it still wasn't great, it had a bigger depth of flavor to make it worthwhile in the end. Which means if I'm ever in an emergency at least, I'll have something adequate to eat, meaning I just have to try the next one. With the cube of meat being cooked over a flame before he tried it, giving him no choice but to admit that it was even worse. Without any fat to it, the texture was tough and the taste was beyond lacking, a fact repeated when he materialized it himself, but in the end it was healthy and it would do. Let's see, even if it's not great, slice it thin and cover it in a sauce and it will be good enough to keep someone alive. Actually, it should be fine to eat raw too. Not much risk of bacteria from something being materialized. The thought made him give it a try, finding it to actually be fairly better that way. Still not good of course, but any improvement was worth taking and he immediately began his work of creating more, talking up to his god as he did. So Myriad, how many of these things do you think I should make? With how many souls I want to put in them and my current power level, they should be able to materialize every minute without running out of mana, and hopefully if my soul expands again soon we can speed that up even more. Can you ask Nair to think of something appropriate for me? And I really mean appropriate. These things should go for a lot, but I am willing to accept a payment plan that stretches out across after the war ends if that's what needs to happen. Ben just shrugged. In the event I do die and the world goes on, it would be nice to at least know the people I care about would be able to divide up my wealth, including you. You know what? Give me a second. While he was on the topic, he materialized a letter in a box, leaving it tucked away in the corner of the shop where he didn't think Falk would fiddle with it if he came through. And now I officially have a will. Hope you feel loved, Myriad. 1/3 of my wealth is going to your church, so you better use it well. If I die, just tell Nair to tell Falk what that is. Okay. Hey, better to have it and not need it, right? I'm still going to do everything in my power to live, so don't worry too much about it and just appreciate the fortune your church is going to be getting. You're the biggest recipient by a mile. Everyone has to go eventually, man. Though I'm sorry to say that I don't plan on merging into you when the time comes. I'll see whatever's next for myself. Ha! Maybe I should then, he teased. That's me cheating my way to godhood if my current attempts don't work out. You might be reading a stolen copy. Visit Royal Road for the authentic version. Myriad went quiet from there, letting Ben carry on his work as he went, making all of the materializers he could and making sure to include an engraving saying they were brought about by the Church of Myriad on every single one. No reason not to include that bit of advertising on an item that was going to be feeding the world after all, and scoring his god some more faith never actually hurt either of them, especially not for something as simple as that. And while he worked, he continued to think, his newest creation bringing a simple question to his mind. What else can I do with souls? It was a question worth considering now that he'd found a use beyond just stealing their power and creating them for the massive quantities of experience such an act gave. He'd found something wholly unique that souls could be used for, and when there was one discovery there was sure to be more in waiting, just begging to be learned as he went over all he knew. Though unfortunately, the two most promising avenues came up empty as he went over them. Both the spells of death and soul magic were applied to the souls of people, beings who had lived their lives and had experience to reflect in it. Sure, perhaps a death mage could turn one of the souls he created into a ghost to force it to linger, but without the experience of a life behind it, what would it even be good for? Same when it came to soul magic. He was sure that some of the spells could be used on the things he made, directing them to greater levels of strength and power, but applied to something that had never held a mind and it would be pointless, forcing him to look at other options, with one more promising than the rest as he once more addressed the heavens. Myriad, I'm about to test something, so could you keep watch and be prepared to grab some help if things go wrong? I want to clarify that it will probably be fine. Okay, fair point, I can step out. Still, do me a favor and watch. I prefer to have friends in high places for when things go wrong. You got it. Slipping off his jacket and leaving his clones behind, Ben stepped outside of the shop, back to the streets of Stonewall, enjoying the smallest bit of foot traffic around him there to take advantage of in the event something went wrong as he put together his small test. Taking a soul crystal he'd made for the materializers, he slid it into a divot he'd created in one of his bracelets before enchanting it with the desired effect. Beast form. The same skill Raylia and the true shifter held, and the same skill that had once led to his own hand attacking him from the demon soul he'd let into his body. He'd never experimented with it again because of that, and because of a firm demand from the gods that he never trapped the soul of anything else for his experiments, but now he had a different avenue to look at it. How would a blank soul, one that had never been touched by a vessel to hold it, react to being used? Would his body shapeshift in some unusual way like the demon's soul had warped his arm? Perhaps since it had always been a soul and nothing more, it might force him to take on some ghostly qualities. He wouldn't say no to a way to phase through walls if he got the chance, no matter how low he actually viewed the odds of that happening. But really there was no way to know if he'd get any result or nothing at all without trying it, and holding off no longer he activated the enchantment to mingle the blank soul with his own, all to see what he would get. With the answer being nothing physical. His flesh didn't warp or change. On that front he was still entirely human, or as entirely human as someone with the 9th level of integrated demonic body could be. But there was in fact an instant difference he could feel within himself. Power. Neither an insignificant nor a world-changing amount. While he wore it, he didn't just feel an increase to one of his attributes, but instead all of them. A rough estimate as he moved his body telling him everything had just improved by around 10% without any obvious side effects while he kept it up. Okay, this is good. This is actually really, really good. 10% is nothing to turn your nose up at, and since it's a tool it's easy to keep up, leaving only the question of how this is going to affect my growth rates while I wear it. Something worth testing. But first, how well does it stack? He was immediately trying again, adding a soul crystal to a bracelet on his other arm and activating it, this time feeling a twinge of pain in his soul as the spiritual weight of a second one was piled on, with more moving around making him aware that the increase hadn't kept consistent, instead ending at a total of 15% improvement and testing more from there. Each time he activated another, the pain he was under increased a bit, and each time the performance of the additional one halved, telling him there was an increase to a decent point but nothing more, the potential getting ever closer to 20% more but never actually reaching it, and showing him that there really wasn't a need to wear more than 3 at once for a good enough effect if he was going to, taking them off in the end without issue as plans formed in his head. Okay, let's see. Myriad, can you send a practice dummy my way, so I can have someone to experiment on? Ask Zakhel to send Sko over. Tell her she and Raelia can come along too, so they can decide if they want to give them a go. I'll pay them, it's fine. I do feel the need to point out that your church isn't exactly doling out the living expenses for its core members. And now one can be even finer if she wants the chance to earn some money, so for now, just ask her. I'll make it worth their while. Sporting hesitant looks from two of them, Satchel's party made their way to the shop, still trying to be optimistic considering how the last 2 times had gone for them. Sakhel and Raelia had been able to speed through multiple jobs thanks to his help, and the entire party had gotten to benefit from his new strengthening potions after they'd gone to collect the seeds for them, making putting up with whatever he was going to put them through currently look like a winning strategy, especially when he was offering to pay. Regardless of whatever it was, they all knew it would be at worst the equivalent of weeks of work, which was far too much money to want to turn away so casually, leading them to his door. "Friends, welcome. So good to have you all," he greeted enthusiastically, instantly raising the worry of the ones he didn't share a faith with. "We've made a serious mistake," Sko muttered. Raelia nodding by his side, but neither tried to escape now that they were in his sights, with Ben looking more annoyed than anything else. "Okay, first of all, rude. Second, you're actually in less danger than usual for what I want to test on you. I've literally already tested it on myself first, so I just want to use you guys to check the long-term results. Plus, you'll all be fairly compensated for it. Ignore them, Ben. They'll get used to you one day. So what can we help you with?" "Sakhel, this is why you'll always be my favorite. The bond between fellow worshippers really is something else. Anyway, for anyone who wants to, you just need to wear one of these," he explained, holding out the bracelets. "Keep them activated at all times and check and record your attributes daily, so I can see how they change after. Do you mind?" "In principle, no, but what do they do and what are you looking for?" "An excellent question. You can think of them as a different sort of buff bracelet. If my results are repeatable, then you should find your attributes growing by about 10% for everything, and what I'm trying to check for is how it affects your growth rates. Since this isn't a normal sort of buff, I need to know how bad the side effects of them are. Ideally, I'd like you guys to wear them for 2 weeks, and if you like them, you can keep them after. I mean, a hit to our growth rates could be a real problem, even if it's just for a couple weeks." Sko started before Ben cut him off. "And you'll be well compensated to make up for that, not to mention the fact that the divine potions I've given you will help make up for a lot of whatever growth you might lose in that time. So what do you say?" Sko and Raelia looked between each other, still unsure, while Sakhel spoke up without another thought. "Sure, sounds useful. Do I even want to ask the ranking? This one's nothing crazy, only upper ultra rare. We have different definitions of nothing crazy." Hearing the ranking settled things for the other two, though, both instantly on board to try, just for the knowledge that they'd gotten to enjoy such a quality item at least once in their lives as the bracelets were handed over and activated. All of them reacting instantly while Sakhel and Raelia both spoke at once. "This is way more than a 10% increase. Why is there a soul in this?" Okay, we're actually going to get back to Satchel's comment in a minute. Raelia, how can you tell? The way this feels, did you manage to model it off a beast form skill? Good senses, I should have known you might pick up on that. You're right about both. The strength in it comes from a soul, and it's using a copy of that skill with a few others tied into it for full effect. What do you think? I think my whole body feels weird. I feel more powerful, but everything I am kind of lightly hurts. What? That shouldn't be happening. 1 second. He connected to her to experience her senses, finding she was under a similar level of pain as when he'd put on 2. It wasn't unbearable, especially not compared to some of the other things he'd put his soul through, but it was there, constantly making itself known to her while she wore it. The tail has been stolen. If detected on Amazon, report the violation. Interesting, it seems like a reaction with your personal beast form skill. Raelia, if you're willing to put up with that, then I'll pay you triple to also test if it eventually fades away. Deal. Perfect. Now just 1 second while I address what Sakhel said. He expanded the effects of Connect to reach the others to feel what they did before pilfering through their memories. Something he was going to need to do anyway to get an idea of how fast their attributes typically grew to compare against the results of his test, but in that moment to also understand how powerful they usually felt before it, coming to a surprising discovery. The growth they'd gotten from the tool didn't seem to be based off of their attributes, but his. It shouldn't have shocked him. He was already seeing that how much mana a soul he created could hold seemed to be directly related to his own total volume for reasons he still wasn't certain of, but the fact that they were getting results based off of his own changed things in a big way. When he did the math, they were all actually getting worse growth than him if they went percentage-wise, only getting an increase of 5% of what each of his attributes had, which he could only assume had to do with how the nature of the souls he'd create would relate to his own in yet another way he didn't know how to test. But looking at it proportionally based on what they each currently held, the change was massive. The buffs that were piled more than doubling their attributes in some cases, especially when it came to intelligence. They were all getting to enjoy the years of work he'd put in, sleeping with Morbusial and Deathstone to train, all of the jobs he'd been through, all of his awakenings and every deal with the gods and other skills he held that were helping to raise things for him, and as good as that all objectively was for the world as a whole, it couldn't help but leave a bad taste in his mouth knowing that years spent clawing his way up from the bottom could now so easily be given away instantly without the effort to go along with it. That's a dumb feeling though. I'm being stupid. This is objectively a good thing. Even if I accidentally just created yet another tool the gods are going to want me to mass produce. Okay, I'm going to have to stop materializing everything myself when I'm also trying to get my levels. At this point, it really is too much. When I'm done here, I'll work on that, but for now... Ben, are you okay? Sakhel asked him. You look kind of unhappy about this. Oh, just a lot of complicated emotions swimming around in me right now, it's fine. Anyway, I have a quest in about a week that should take a few days, but I'll check in on you when I get back if that's cool. Sorry. Would it be okay if I convey our results through Myriad? She asked him. We actually have a pretty big escorting quest soon too, and since it's going to take us near my village, I want to make sure my family is all okay. Oh, of course, no worries. In that case, tell everyone I say hi and... okay, seeing as how you're the Oracle of Myriad, I guess I can treat you a bit. 1 second while you enjoy the perks of the faith. Pulling out some of his remaining Voidstone from his many rings, Ben quickly shaped and enchanted on it, making a brand new one to give to her and explained its purpose in only a few words. Spatial ring. Put things in and take things out and make sure you guys keep safe and alive to give me my results. What? Like a bag but instead a ring. It's handy, you get about 2 cubic meters of space from that one, which reminds me, I really should remake my current one since I leveled up recently. That's on the to-do list I guess. I'll get that done later. Ben, do I even want to know what the ranking of this is? A very low, very reasonable middle legendary, with all of the usual threats about what will happen if you spread that around implied. Oh, and a warning in general that you really shouldn't talk about it casually, even if you keep its rank to yourself. These aren't exactly on the market since making them involved creating a previously non-existent form of matter, and I'd rather not find out someone decided to try and cut your hand off for it. If you have a bag around, try to make it look like you're pulling things from that instead. Sakhel? She still didn't answer, dealing with the knowledge that she'd just been given a legendary item like it was nothing, with the various feelings tied to that coming out in full force, with overwhelming guilt at the idea making her speak up. Ben Dash. Not only have I given one to Delaire and Fontesh, but we've already had a talk before about your value as a member of the faith. If you try to return it, I'm destroying Sko's brain. Why? Neither paid attention to the warrior's scream, with only Raylia giving him a consoling pat on the shoulder while Sakhel made up her mind. I understand. I'll try to get better at accepting gifts. Good. In that case, thank you guys for coming and thanks for being willing to test those out, but I've got to get back to things. I've got some work to finish up and some more ideas to test out, so for now I need to get back to it. Do me a favor and don't get killed for whatever you're escorting. Saying goodbye and watching as they walked away, Ben went back inside and closed the shop doors behind him. A new idea as to what he could test with the souls he could create swirling around in his head. Going through the gate from the shop back to his warehouse, Ben took over his clones once more and got back to work on making materializers, placing a special focus on making ones for himself. Even with his jacket, he was getting to the point that trying to create all of the souls he needed for his leveling while also materializing other items in their entirety was becoming a new sort of strain, one that was going to slow down how long it would be for the next level he wanted so badly, and he moved to change that by creating tools to materialize any major substance he might need. Perhaps as a limit of his own soul reflecting in the ones he could create, he learned he couldn't produce a materializer for any of the affinitied magic materials, meaning Voidstone and Deathstone were locked away from him, only to be created when he could borrow Jake's mind and soul. But as useful as those would have both been to have endless access to, he was much more concerned about the more basic ones. He'd already created something that could make Rainbow Mana Crystal, and from there he made sure to make something that could handle the White One and then Mithril and Morbusal as well before going to the more common metals like Iron to help in his work, meaning that one of his bigger mana costs in the form of all of his materialization could shrink to something significantly lighter by only needing to shape the substances instead, either with his hands or his mana in a way that would still be a significant savings. It was only once that was done that he began creating soul crystals en masse for all of the uses he'd already found for them while holding a single one in his hand, a question forming in his mind while so much of himself was working around him. To what extent could he modify an existing soul? It was seeing Raylia that had made him wonder that, her strange soul clear in his eyes as the question of if he could in any way repeat the work of the ancient soul mage that had radically altered the destiny of her kind. Could Ben materialize a soul in a way that would merge it into another soul? It was a question he couldn't deny himself the pleasure of investing a few hours in, doing everything he could to build on the simple soul he'd created and in the end having what he would describe as meaningless success. The soul he was testing on was the simplest he could produce, and when he tried, Ben was able to build it up to an extent, bringing any of the strange aspects of its structure to the maximum he could make when materializing them and a few aspects even beyond that, though far from enough for his liking. Namely what he considered the core ones. Sure, he'd found he could increase the scale of some parts of a soul whose purposes entirely eluded him, but that wasn't actually helpful. It only really mattered when he tested an idea significantly more relevant to himself as he tried to build up its affinities and resistances, and that had ended in failure, telling him he was still as trapped as he'd ever been, locked away from the more common magics of the world, and not even in a position where he could improve a few of the more beneficial resistances he had. Stolen from its original source, this story is not meant to be on Amazon. Report any sightings. So it looks like I'm not going to raise my fire resistance above 100 to beat out the magic. Lame, but it's not like I wasn't expecting it no matter how thrilling it would have been to be wrong. But with all of that done, time to start trying to test the big one. The big one being to merge two souls together. He could already materialize them in such a state, but what he wanted to know was if he could build on top of something that already existed, letting him bring forth something more for all of the potential applications that could have for both him and the world at large depending on what the results ended up as. Given his results from just combining what he could already make with a beast form skill, he was at least hopeful that it wouldn't be outright harmful, but he first spent a while mentally going over what he'd seen in both Raylia and the True Shifter souls to try and determine how he wanted to do it before making his first attempt, ending up in failure when it was over. Not that that discouraged him, and he tried again, constantly working and tweaking how he tried to blend them together, constantly failing until he felt a configuration that clicked into place, giving him the result he craved as he looked it over. Different from a beast form skill, it was undeniably what he'd been looking for, even if he didn't let that be the end. If it looked different from a beast form skill, then that meant there were likely multiple ways to potentially merge the two. In the case of what he was seeing, he was sure the difference lied in the fact that he was materializing a soul in a way that it bound to another compared to attaching a normal one, but there was no reason to end his experimenting there when he wanted to see the limits of what was possible. With two examples he knew of already telling him there was plenty of room to go. He'd already been considering the True Shifter as he did his tests, but his own god was an even greater example. Billions of souls joining together as one with multiple deities added to the mix on top of them. The structures he saw when looking at Myriad were worth considering, and he kept going while keeping his successful example to look at in greater detail later, enjoying the simple process of experimentation the entire time. For every success there were a dozen failures, but nearing 100 successes was enough to give him plenty to look at for the future as he tried to replicate them again before going even further, trying to add more and more souls each time and blending the pattern of what worked and what didn't, with the obvious question forming in his mind by the time he was done. What would happen if I tried this on an actual person's soul? It was a step too far to try and use Sko as a test subject again, but the question scratched at the walls of his mind, begging to be let out as he looked at some of the Lovecraftian constructs he'd ended up with. Things he'd never seen before in a mortal of any sort but still continued to exist in the end, telling him that no matter how bizarre they looked, they were all acceptable configurations of essence, even if he didn't know how that would translate to anything inhabiting a proper vessel. And if I want to test it out, then I'd want to be doing it on something with system access, and it just so happens that the world is currently overfilled with completely ethical test subjects. Okay. Tomorrow is planned out then from the looks of it, so long as Thera can give me a hand, so for now let's just get back to it and see if there's any other configurations I can find. With hours left in the day, it would have been a waste not to experiment all he could, and he did it with gusto, trying to find the limitations of what he could create and how far it could go while the hours wore on. Pulling Thera along to Analia that day, the grin on his face wouldn't disappear. Not because of what he was going to test, not because of the things he made or any more progress in his various projects. What was thrilling him to no end was a level, sitting at the top of his card and singing out his progress with one more going to his ridiculous job, leaving him only needing to finish it to be able to finally say he was done and move on to his next one. Which means I need to go to the Adventurers Guild soon to get all of the adventurers, mages, and mind users I can get my hands on. Let's see, I should arrange things to try and have them arrive for when this stupid quest is supposed to end. I should be done it before we leave, so long as I push myself, and if I need to get my soul fixed up, well, that's just life at that point. God, I'm so freaking close. Even more power, here I come. It was tempting enough that it made him want to head back to the shop then and there, only resisting the impulse for the sake of his experimentation. While not a soul that had been influenced by its vessel the way the beast form holders had to take advantage of, it was possible there would be different benefits to any of the ways he might materialize a soul into another, and he needed to know for sure, with preparations required to check what the results would be as they went along through Thera's family home, looking for whatever familiar face they could get and end up with Rit as he walked along with his son, the young half-spirit beaming when he noticed Thera and running over. "Aw, look at you, you're getting so fast," Thera gushed as she scooped him up while the youngest half-spirit laughed in her arms. "Aren't you just the sweetest?" "Ha, he's got a bit too much energy, I'd say," Rit told them, trying to tucker him out a bit to get a nap in him. "But how are you two? What brings you by?" "Ah, I was hoping to find Pelania for a moment if she can free up some time," Ben explained. "I get it's not the best timing, but dash. No bother, no bother. I think I know where she is, so I'll lead the way. Come on." They followed along, through the halls and down flights of stairs while Thera kept entertaining her younger cousin, making small talk along the way. "So is Auntie out right now?" "Ah, you know how Lux is. She's going all over to clear out hospitals as fast as she can. It must be 100 a day at the least she's doing when she's not tagging along for some exterminations. I'm sure they're all grateful to have her around. Course, but we've been hearing the same about you. A lot of people are appreciating your work, Thera." "Ah, I'm really not doing too much, especially not compared to her. I'm just helping where I can. Which is plenty. Don't count yourself out too quickly now. Lux has heard your name come up around more than a few healers you've worked with, and I guess the little spirits are talking about you all of the time too from the way she says it. I still don't know what to do about that." "Ha, what's there to do? They love you. Isn't that good enough?" The conversation broke as they were led into a full room, Pelania at the head of it and surrounded by her staff and various advisors that made it clear they'd interrupted, even if the queen looked relieved for the intrusion while Rit spoke up. "Hey Pelania, the kids were looking for you a bit," he called out through the eyes staring them down while she jumped up. "Reading on this site? This novel is published elsewhere. Support the author by seeking out the original. Then I suppose I'll need to take a small break. All of you, relax for a few minutes while I handle this." "But your Majesty -1 tried before immediately being cut off. Hey, small break. What's the point in my husband ensuring we're all kept safe if you all still want to work me to death in the end? Now all of you wait there. I'll be right back." She didn't give them room to argue as she went out, signing in relief before taking Saren from Thera's arms for what emotional healing the small child could provide. "You all really should come through to interrupt a bit more often," she told them. "I really don't mind." "I do," Thera muttered back. Why exactly did you want to be queen when you hate doing the work? I only hate some of it, and I wasn't exactly expecting to deal with all of this in my lifetime when I went for the role, you know? It's positively ruined my fun. Well, we'll keep this quick anyway, Ben said, cutting in before they could really start arguing. Is there any chance you could get me some blank cards, Pelania? Like, as many as you can. Give me an actual number and I'll see what I can do. You need them today. I do, and ideally 1,000 of them if it's not much trouble, but at the very least 100. Really though, the more the better, so I'd take whatever you can get your hands on for me. You know, it might be easy to forget because everyone gets them for free, but these really are quite valuable. What could you possibly need so many for? Running some experiments, and they'll help me gauge the effects. If things work out, then there might be some useful results for the planet as a whole. Fine, in that case, would you lead them to the lounge? I'll send for someone to bring you whatever I can, but this is added to your ever-growing debt by this point. Ben. I want grandchildren. Mom. If you can convince your daughter, then sure. Ignoring them, Pelania walked off while they were taken to another room, finding it already occupied as they went in, with the great space spirit O'Gilt sitting quietly on a couch, slowly looking at them and nodding. Ah, Ben, hello. And my nephew? Niece? O'Gilt, Ritz said as he walked over, patting the spirit's shoulder. The little lady would be your niece. Ah, my apologies. It's no problem, Thera said, looking a little uncomfortable. The only time she'd met her newest uncle in the past had been when Ben had first come back, and if she were being honest, she hadn't cared too much at the time. He hadn't been a priority in comparison, and she wasn't the most interested in that side of the family expanding either. Half of them were complicated enough for her that she didn't want to see how a new member would react to her existence, though it didn't seem like it would be poorly so far. Slipping from his father's arms, Saren moved to sit on his newest uncle's lap, looking perfectly content as he finally drifted off while the Great Spirit held him, seeming to have become used to such a thing in the weeks he'd been there. The room fell quiet soon after, none of them knowing what to say, and it lasted for a few minutes until Ben forcefully broke it, looking at his fellow captive. So, how are you finding being here? He asked O'Gilt, getting a weak response for his try. Shameful. How could living amongst my handiwork be anything but? Okay. How are the other space spirits managing? Fine, I suppose. They don't leave the city's limits, but they're making do. That didn't sound fine for a race that craved freedom so much that they'd left to explore the stars, but there was nothing for him to say to that. They'd been held for so long that if they needed to take some time, then so be it. It wasn't his place to judge when he had no way to help, especially if the one who led them seemed the worst off of all. All those few words succeeded in was killing the conversation once more, bringing the room back to an awkward silence until Pelania came in a while later with one very full case. All right, you're in luck. Birth rates have dropped enough when word that the invasion was finally arriving got out that there's a surplus. I was able to send for about 2,000, so try to make the most of them you can, and if you discover anything worthwhile, then let us know. Oh, sweet. Will do, you're the best, Pelania. It was all they'd come there for and all they needed to do, but on an impulse he changed his plans ever so slightly, focusing in on the Great Spirit as they were getting up. And O'Gilt, come with us. Why? Have you left the building since I brought you here? No. Yeah, so that's why. Come on. I'm putting you to work. Ben, are you sure this is a good idea? Thera whispered to him as they walked down the streets, heading to the gate. It might be better if he stayed inside. He can't be there forever. Ben shrugged while O'Gilt flinched away from any passing member of the public they walked by as they made their way through the city. I should be. I deserve worse, the spirit said, not bothering to pretend as though he couldn't hear them. All of this entire planet is my fault. I can't just dash. Rot away doing nothing, correct? Ben cut him off. So what you'll do instead is help me work. I only need you to handle things for a week or so to let me get a feel for results, and then if you want you can hide away again, but it really would be more useful for everyone if you came out to help. I'd only make things worse. You really won't, but whatever. For now, come on and you can decide how you feel later. Walking through to the network, Ben noticed the spirit perk up a bit, experiencing his first time in the strange space that linked gates as they went to one connected to a region of the untamed lands to finally get on to what he really wanted to do that day, speaking up as they got there. All right, now to just find a sufficiently large group of demons to use. The only ethical source of experimental materials he could access for the tests he wanted to run. The fact that they were incorporated fully into the system meant he'd be able to check their cards for any changes in their skills or attributes for what he was going to attempt by altering their souls. He didn't expect the search to be quick, but at the same time knew that the creatures had well and truly infested the planet after the last wave. So long as they spent the day on it, and if Thera got the help of the spirits, then they'd be sure to find plenty before it was too late. But before she could raise them in the air to begin their search, Oglet just nodded. Understood then. I will find you some. Before either could say a word, he vanished. His magic sending him off in his search and leaving the two alone, with Thera looking more than a bit relieved for it. Already don't like your new uncle? He asked her. Or is the issue you're not used to a family member being so incredibly handsome? The fact the spirit wore Ben's face made the joke easy, but Thera didn't bite. All I know about him is what my father mentioned growing up, and now the fact that he caused all of this. I mean, I don't dislike him, but Ben, everything that happened all stems back to the fact he wanted to explore. Are you really okay with him? He thought for a second at the question, really searched his soul over it. If the blame for everything that happened was laid at Ogilt's feet, then he was responsible both for the end of countless worlds but also Ben's second chance at life. One didn't remotely excuse the other, but when he thought about it like that, it made him realize that he couldn't feel justified connecting the spirit to either event or anything else that had sprung from it. I'm sorry, I understand why a lot of people and gods would feel like that, but I just can't. He shrugged. He didn't set out to do any harm, did he? He and the other space spirits are objectively the first victims of this all, just wanting to see the universe but having the crap luck of finding a powerful evil god along the way. And yeah, I get the fact that they were the reason things were able to get so bad when the base nature of demons really makes it seem like most of them wouldn't reach the levels of sapience needed to flood on with faith to do something like this otherwise, but I don't think I have it in me to hold anything against a guy who was a hostage for what? Thousands or tens of thousands of years at this point. Maybe, but locking himself inside since he's been freed doesn't exactly show an inclination to try and make up for it. I get what you're saying, Ben, but no matter how guiltless he might be, a lot of people would want to see him doing more if they knew he was here, and that's only if they'd be willing to tolerate his existence on this planet at all. Maybe he's scared. He's still pretty pulled into himself, and I mean, I get it. One bad choice had a hell of a domino effect. I wouldn't be so quick in wanting to make any more either. And if you don't want to be involved with him, then I get it, but as a person who saw a fraction of what he must have, can you do me the favor of at least looking at him a bit more brightly than the great spirits you actively hate? MMH, well, that's not so hard, she admitted. And I don't hate him, I just don't know him or have a reason to get close. No matter what he is to the rest of my family, he's a stranger to me. Still, I can at least be polite. Before I was stuck healing thousands of bodies a day, I was even told my bedside manner was starting to improve. And now nobody gets manners when there's 100 other people waiting, she said a bit more lightly. Although the number's been going down each day. Enough that I've changed my mind. Your mana bracelets are now the best thing you've ever made. Air conditioners are bumped to second. I feel compelled to point out I invented the braces that fundamentally changed how your race and many others get to interact with the world as a whole. Yeah, and that's nice and all, which is why it sits at a healthy third. Being cooled when there's a heat wave, though? Just remembering it is making me already need to reevaluate letting it sit down at second. Her smile told him she was joking, a rarer sight with how much work they both had at all times now that he let himself enjoy before Ogilt returned, looking no different in his mood as he spoke. I found a group. I will lead you. All right, what's the size? 123. Okay. Thera, you ready? I've got it. Great, in that case, Ogilt, lead the way. The spirit opened a hole in space, letting the two through to what waited beyond, with Thera casting as she walked, letting out her dark magic the instant she laid her eyes on them as they were busy fighting amongst themselves, freezing most of them in place on the spot with only a couple that seemed immune to her effect. with those ones instantly being impaled by spears of earth jutting up from the ground below. This narrative has been purloined without the author's approval. Report any appearances on Amazon. Awesome. Ben nodded as he looked around. Then I guess it's my turn. He walked through the crowd, having faith that Thera had them properly under her control as he reached out deep connection to read the skills of each one, materializing and firing off small bullets each time one had either earth or space magic and killing a few more if they had any skill that stood out as being a risk, ending with only 102 left by the end. Okay, a lot less than I was hoping for, but even if we'd kept the whole group, we would have needed over 1,000 more to get most of my testing done, so for now this works. Thera, I'm going to borrow your brain for just a bit. Okay? Let's just make this bit of your plan quick. Okay? It will be over in a jiffy. Connecting to her and weaving his mind into hers, he in essence provided her a blueprint of what he needed her to make as dirt and stone were pulled out of the ground and minor acts of materialization took place while a building was constructed to act as a prison for those they'd caught. Ignoring the new notification, Ben simply admired what they'd worked together to construct. It would in every way that mattered break essentially every ethical limit on how prisoners should be treated with its closet-like rooms that didn't even give the space to lay down, but the second they'd had the misfortune to be caught by him, they'd lost any chance to be anything other than test subjects, scheduled for extermination the moment his experiments were done. He went over to the closest one and cut its flesh to smear some blood on one of the blank cards he'd received, letting him look at the various aspects of the creature beyond its skills he couldn't see. Its attributes were all high but still below 1,000, and while that one had decent affinities for life, death, and fire magic, its resistances were just as poor as anything he'd expect from an average citizen of the planet. It was only once he'd looked it over and had it memorized that he did what he went out there for, looking at the beast's soul while trying to materialize on it and feeling himself fail in the end. Lame but not entirely unexpected, he muttered to himself. Materializing one of my blank souls onto a living one instead of another blank soul was never guaranteed to work the same way. No experiment ever survives first contact with the real world, I suppose, but I figured out enough different configurations to have plenty to test until one properly clicks. Okay, let's give this a go. He tried again and again, not getting one that worked until the 6th time, but knowing he had a result as soon as he did for what he felt through the connection he was keeping up between them. A notification in their mind saying they'd acquired the levelless skill Empty Soul and a sharp, non-physical pain that Ben knew all too well at that point that could only have been an unnatural strain on the demon's soul, and he looked at the card to look for any additional changes. No difference in skills, but vitality and strength both rose by over 100? Interesting. Worse than I'd hoped, but interesting. Given that connecting a person to one of his blank souls through a beast form skill raised a person's attributes by 5% of his own. He'd been expecting he might get that much from any of them if he properly merged one of his souls into another, and the two it got were at least close, even if those were the only ones. Still, it was a disappointing result, especially when one added in the fact that even getting 10% to everything was still worse than what he'd really wanted to see. The souls he made could hold 50% of his mana volume. Giving that to himself would be incredible alone, even if it meant risking damage to his soul in the process. But giving that to every mage on the planet would be world-shaking beyond anything else he'd done. If he could pull that off, then it didn't matter how much the gods might want to resist. They'd have to come together to raise his mana as much as they could possibly do and give him whatever blessings he wanted on top of it. He'd literally be too valuable not to invest all they had in. But without getting that in his first attempt, Ben had no choice but to carry out all of his testing as he turned to Ogilt, nodding at the one he'd just finished with. Move this guy to room 1 please and place his card on the front of his door. Now on to the next. With one done, the first thing he did after giving it a card and checking its information was repeat all of his previous failed attempts. He knew they worked on his blank souls after all, which implied it could work on normal ones if the conditions were right, but once those failed he repeated his last test to see if the results would be consistent, finding them to be largely the same with a variance of only 1 point in vitality. He chalked up to the demon's original values being close enough to raising a point to make that difference. From there his routine began, giving a card and checking information before repeating previously failed attempts and then moving on to new ones until he found one that worked, moving on once 2 demons had the same modification for him to record the effect of. It was part way through that he sent Ogilt off to look for more groups and once found got Thera to deal with them, enslaving what she could and killing what she couldn't before they were brought over to be looked at for anything that might imply a risk of escape while the number of test subjects only grew. By the end of over 100 potential modifications that he knew would work on his created souls, only 16 worked on living ones, all gaining skills named things along the lines of empty, blank, modified, and altered soul, with some of the different modifications yielding the same name despite both differing configurations and final effects. It was an interesting result and something to look further into in the future, but the most important result was that 3 of the arrangements yielded the 5% increase to all attributes he'd hoped. Even if they were all missing the incredible boost to mana he'd been wanting to see as the first stage of experimentation ended. But he wasn't done from there. That was just the base modification after all. He needed to test to see the effect of stacking modifications on living beings to see whatever long-term effects it would hold, creating the need for so many demons to test on. After all, he hadn't given up on a few of the failed configurations he'd come up with still, and with so many more bodies to go there was no reason to stop until the last one. So failed tests went on again and again until it was time to try and stack different configurations of souls, feeling the reactions of each one. There wasn't a single case where the level of pain they were under didn't explode, the creatures unable to voice it out of the command Thera had over them. But that yielded results of its own, with some getting better increases in attributes while some got worse and others were even able to stack previously failed soul configurations in a way that their base soul hadn't managed. Still, he memorized the results each time, keeping track of what worked and what didn't as he finished up until all possible configurations of 2 added souls were done, letting him move on to testing arrangements of 3 and feeling an interesting result from the first that worked. With his test subject's mind collapsing in on itself out of the agony its soul was under. Interesting. Ben thought analytically, feeling nothing about the result other than curiosity. Part of what I'm testing by holding them is going to be seeing how long any pain lasts too. I was planning on just disposing of them once results are in, but since I'll have Ogilt watching them to make sure none escape, there's really no rush on enjoying my test subjects as long as possible. In that case, if and when the pain fades for the first ones, I'll have to see if adding one more is going to be just as bad for them as it was by doing it on the same day. Okay, lots of things to look at here for a while to come. Okay, I kind of take umbrage with that second one at least. There is literally no negative feeling behind this. I'm as unfeeling and analytical about my potential results and test subjects as can be. World Killer's bonuses have just really shown through in full force today, I guess. Oh well, we've got 2,000 rooms and plenty of hours left in the day. Whatever the system might want to say about it, let's fill them up. Just because a few minds collapsed didn't mean he could stop working after all. He could still feel the pain they were under when he connected to them, and he could still check results through their cards, meaning no matter what happened, he'd get data he could work off of. At a scheduled time in the morning the next day, Ogilt opened a portal between Stonewall and their prison out in the woods. It was both to let Thera renew her spells on the demons to keep them from getting too unruly, and to let Ben do a variety of tasks, from examining their minds and cards for changes to bringing a mini-gate through to make checking easier for him, on top of providing 2 materializers, one creating food and one water, so the space spirit could teleport both into the test subject's stomachs to keep them alive longer for results to be collected, ending with another tool brought to keep the demons from getting too unruly while they were gone. He'd spent the night creating mind control circlets, improving the designs from the last time he'd constructed such an enchantment to keep them all contained and in line in the event enough time passed for Thera's spells to wear off. Better to keep them docile and easy to work with for however long he'd be having them. A significant part of him knew that everything he was doing was unethical no matter what the reason he held for it, but they were demons. They weren't some enemy that just happened to be fighting on another side of a war that could have been understood and befriended if experiences had only been a little different. They literally lacked the capacity for such things, only caring about getting stronger and fulfilling their base desires, ensuring that anything they didn't outright kill was kept squarely below them. The fact that they should have been killed the instant they'd been found, and that his tests had the chance to improve the odds for the world and its people as a whole let him justify it to himself, and his lack of empathy towards the creatures meant it was never going to be a concern, with the only thing weighing remotely on his mind being the question of how the human race as a whole might have judged him for his actions. But they can't, so it doesn't matter. He told himself as he finished and left, parting with Thera as she went to work for the day while he went to begin rolling the ball for a task of his own. Maybe this is wrong. I'm objectively subjecting an enemy to torture and inhumane experimentation, but seeing as how peace can't be an option, I need to focus on improving the odds for the side I care about winning. It's that simple. He fully believed it too, but he couldn't deny the small part of himself that was for once grateful to be fully cut off from his homeworld, not wanting to give any mind to what the people he'd long lost might think of the man he'd slowly become. It was as he moved through gates and got to the magic towers that he was able to clear the thought from his many minds to instead focus on what he was there for as he made his way to their local branch of the Adventurers Guild. The plan was to put in a request for all of the people he'd need, offering to pay an excellent price to each one. And since he wanted it done fast, it made far more sense to head out to a bigger guild on a gate network than to try and arrange it through Stonewall's local branch. And as he got there, he let himself in and went to the front desk, same as when he'd gone looking for information on the Dark Tower, with his card already in hand and rank displayed for the waiting receptionist. "Hello there, I'm looking to make a request," Ben told them brightly, not giving them time to react to his rank in any way that could cause him problems. "I am looking for people who hold the adventurer's job with at least 2 spots open in their party, but preferably more if possible. To be clear, I'm not looking for a single party. I'm looking for up to 70, but failing that, as many as you can find me. In addition, for every party that doesn't already have either an apprentice mage or a true mage in it, I'll be looking for one of those 2 as well. Finally, I'll also be looking for as many people currently under the mind user job as you can get your hands on for me. I'd be hoping to get them all in 7 days, but I'll come in a day or 2 beforehand to get an idea of who you were able to get for me and the party compositions for the adventurers." He said 70 despite not having that many jobs, both to prepare for the fact that many of them would be partway through their adventurer jobs, meaning he'd have an incomplete experience pool to work off of, as well as in anticipation of any advanced varieties he might end up with, since he had no way to actually know how that would work out. There were some within his list he was sure would give him additional options, such as High Actualizer yielding its master job after, along with whatever options would spring up after that, with a sacrilege-aligned one feeling practically guaranteed at the very least. But then there was the host of ones he'd never found reference to in any book he'd read to that point that all sat as complete mysteries to him. Unauthorized content usage. If you discover this narrative on Amazon, report the violation. There was also the issue of his 3 currently available master jobs. While those would normally always give advanced branches, with the main exception he could think of being Master Adventurer, he had no clue if Title Master or Master of Destiny would give him another option, and Connect Master didn't seem to be a normal master job, since he'd only unlocked it after having taken Mind Master. He had no reason to believe it would give him the expected variance, no matter how badly he wanted it to. Still, it was better to have too much than too little, and in the event he got more people than he needed, he would still pay them for their time. It was the least he had to do to ensure a good showing, and to the receptionist's credit, they didn't bat an eye at either his rank or his quest submission, only waiting to ask additional questions. "I understand. I can take it that you'd like to have this request sent to all of the gate guilds then? And any that are close enough on any gate that a person could reasonably get here in that time frame. I don't care how expensive it is. I'll pay for it, and I'll pay anyone who fits those qualifications double the expected day rate for a rank 2 quest." That got a bit of a reaction, although slight. The vast majority of adventurers didn't even make it to rank 3, let alone rank 2, which a person needed an awakened skill to reach, and here Ben was offering double. For many, that meant weeks to months of pay for the work, leaving only the matter of just what exactly that work would entail. "And the reason you're looking for these specific members and party compositions?" the receptionist asked, with Ben giving a half answer. "I'm looking for a party or parties to join, while trying to put together a composition that would be useful overall to my particular skill set," he explained, not wanting to go into the details of how he planned to speed through all of his jobs by using them for fear that the potential crowd might grow too big if that got out. "I still intend to pay in full, even if they don't meet my qualifications after I see them. All I care about is getting the group together to look at, which should only take me a day, maybe 2 tops. Unless I have another option or 2 that's secretly for the 3rd tier, but in that case I'll just pay more to have them meet me again later after absolutely putting my soul through hell. On the plus side, with the number of souls I can now make combined with the max amount of mana I can force into myself having grown too, I should be able to finish it in a week, easy. 2 or 3 weeks. No matter how much I do it, I'm not getting used to it and the weeks I've already put in have sucked. I'm so freaking looking forward to being done and getting a break until however long it's going to take me to get new options to work through. The answer he gave, however, got him regarded with some level of suspicion, with the guild's receptionist speaking up. If that's the case, then I'd advise you to set a level limit as well for what you're willing to accept. I can understand how difficult it would be for someone of your rank to find matching companions, but getting some at the 6th or 7th levels of the particular skills you're looking for should be of no issue. You certainly don't want to pull someone who's only an apprentice mage, no matter what composition you're looking for. Call it desperation, he explained, materializing before their eyes. If a mage isn't good enough, then I can help them improve, so I don't care about the level. I just need that composition more than anything else. Then if there's any concerns from the guild, they are of course welcome to watch me talk to them all, but I'm certain they'll find no issues. My bigger concern is that you guys might try to hire me on after. The part about training a mage had been entirely a lie to help smooth things over, but materializing had done its job, actually shocking them enough that they accepted his explanation for what it was after getting the additional benefit that was the knowledge the guild would be able to observe everything as it went down, letting him deposit the cost for both sending out the request so far, and wide as well as part of the price he was offering to pay the adventurers that would come to ensure he could both afford the outrageous sum he was offering and verify that even if something happened to him, the ones who came would still get something, ending things there and letting him move on with his day as he left back to the streets, wondering what to do next. With that done, I really should be back off to the shop to make sure I'm actually able to have this stupid job done by then, which means I should update my equipment to be on the safe side for this coming quest too. After all, if I'm not bringing my jacket with me, then I really do need to replace it. Back at the shop, Ben looked at both what he had and what he'd need, with the answer to the latter being largely vague when the only thing he'd really been told about his coming quest was that it was centered around watching as another group fought. Still, there was one obvious standout, more apparent than anything else. His jacket, his strongest line of defense that he'd filled with tens of thousands of souls to take advantage of that he was going to have to leave behind for exactly that fact. If he was being honest with himself, he had to admit that he was in a horribly messy place with his training. He was trying to avoid overusing it, which meant trying to avoid that one aspect of Connect when that was the very skill he was pinning his hopes on trying to awaken. If he could, and if it pulled in his divine enchanting like he so desired, then in theory he'd be able to add third-tier skills to his rings to enchant with on the fly, making new items as needed when trying to deal with own. A skill he then wouldn't be able to use any other aspect of around that same god, for the fact that every other major part of it meant his soul would be expanding out of his body, leaving the safety of his vessel to expose it to a god of souls. Even if his other goal was to awaken sacrilege as well, he couldn't count on the changes that would come with that to keep him safe, which created the horrible conundrum of the fact that he wanted to get to the 3rd tier for a skill he couldn't constantly use at its full potential. So long as he got to the 9th level of it, he could think of options to push it over the edge, but as it was, he was slowing himself down. But I need to slow myself down because I can't be relying on having infinite freaking power when facing the strongest god in the galaxy and probably this whole stupid universe, he complained, trying to rub the forming headache out of his temples as he went. Which really means I shouldn't be using any non-enchanting application for it either, but if I draw that line, then I'm never going to get enough practice for leveling it, and if I do get it to the 3rd tier, then that's something I'll have to consider, but yeah, this isn't helping. I've already said I'm not using the stupid jacket, which means I'm making myself something new to wear for whatever defense it will give out there, and seeing how I'm not the biggest armor person, that just means I'm designing an even newer jacket to use. And pants too. Okay. Plan made, so let's get started. He walked over to his warehouse and pulled out his clones, getting bodies moving to pull materials he had stored to essentially remake the one he already had while adding any improvements he saw fit along the way. Leather was cut and stitched, an inner lining was made and meshed, and the entire structure of it was enhanced with any magic materials he could add in, creating wires and alloys that threaded through the entire thing, while powders were forced within the leather itself for what bits of strength and magic resistance it would grant while the entire thing was being enchanted. It wouldn't have the benefits of what extra strength the Church of Myriad would get for acting as a receptacle for his god's faith, but it did have the benefit of the additional levels he'd claimed for himself since he'd done his last serious renovation on the old one, making up for that small loss in every way except for the power it held. It would be even safer than the old one, with the church not having gotten to enjoy the time or faith needed for it to properly mature as a defensive structure, and he was happy to slip it on, feeling right at home as he did. Oh God. Without looking, I've become a jacket guy. It just feels so good and right. The defensive properties of it would be top-notch too, which was what was going to be most important, but a part of him couldn't help but wonder how long it would be until they'd be breached like the church had so often been in the past. It may have been the pessimist in him, but it did at times feel like no matter how well he constructed something, something else was always going to come along to knock it down. Myriad told him as the god popped into his head. Look, Myriad, on the one hand you're absolutely correct, but on the other, and I want to stress this, I'm not actually a fighter. I haven't trained to deal with all of the issues that come with wearing armor no matter how good I can make it for myself, and I don't have time to get good at it now. I just have to hope that little fact doesn't eventually bite me in the ass. Stolen from its original source, this story is not meant to be on Amazon. Report any sightings. I've told you how I think things will go since I've been back, and there's no fate in this reality to tempt. That reminds me, though, I should ask the Grey if it looks like any other universe has anything like that. They've looked around. They've probably seen a couple. Are they completely incompatible? Well, I'll bring the question to the only multiverse watchers I know at some point, but for now it's a matter of whatever else to make. I'll do pants too in a similar style to the jacket, and I actually modified my barrier shoes to give me an edge in running instead of protection that I think I'll keep, but I need to think about weapons too. Or do I? Let's be real, if we look at my overall build and skill composition, if you ignore the fact that I'm so obviously a craftsman, I really am a good mage. Myriad. That's literally so offensive on so many fronts. Of course I'm a craftsman. I'm a crafty guy. Quiet you. And sure, I'm a contender for 3 mind skills with a couple more awakened ones for good measure. And sure, my sacrilege is high and a few of my newer skills are growing uncomfortably quickly in my day-to-day life, even when I really feel like I've been doing nothing wrong. But what matters is if I keep going, I'm going to give myself an identity crisis as I question if I really am a craftsman, so I'm just going to drop the topic here and go back to making things so toodaloo. With the first distraction from that brief conversation going to weapons. Despite whatever Myriad had to say, he was going to choose to consider being a mage as his second main group of skills, and given he was the best materializer on the planet, it was a position he was happy to claim. But while that brought the question of if he even needed to make new weapons, he couldn't deny the bit of comfort that came with having something to hold in his hand as he made the main 2 he'd usually go for, starting with a knife. Given the demon who'd kidnapped him had destroyed his original, one he'd never even gotten to put to full use after he'd made it, he began the process of recreation, even if he was able to add a few handy modifications, both in the materials he'd used and the enchantments he had access to, improving the end product greatly as he created something he could adjust for any given situation. It was only once he was done that he slipped it into one of his many rings and, after looking at his very full fingers, decided to make more to go along with it. He'd been trying to be prepared for anything by making so many after all. It would be a shame not to use the space as more knives were made and stored away, each one made with care, while he hoped things would never actually get desperate enough that he'd have to use them. A knife fight meant he was already far too close to an opponent after all, and even if he had an excellent understanding of how they could be used that stemmed from his competency as a craftsman, he lacked actual training in that regard that would have helped him actually grow in his proficiency handling them. But I'm not adding learning to stab people better to my to-do list when I have so much other freaking crap, and since I ideally won't get close enough to anything for it to matter, I just need to make a few guns and I can finish up. It was another task that was simple by that point, in essence just remaking things he'd created in the past and applying better enchantments to make it work. At least that had been the intention until he'd had an idea he couldn't resist. Taking the basic revolver design he was so used to, he pulled out a bit of his remaining voidstone and enchanted a spatial effect in it with the intent of adding it to the handle's core next to the mana crystal he was going to put to power his shots. It was what was going within that new magical space that mattered, though, with Ben inserting one of his materializers, modifying the design just enough so the output would be shaped and sized the way he needed to create bullets when it was activated, being materialized directly into the chambers. From there, it was only a matter of making sure it would do so the instant all previous shots were used, and with hundreds of souls added to power it, he was done, grinning broadly as he held it. A gun with infinite ammo. Oh yeah, I really am the absolute best. Basically playing with cheat codes at this point. In the event he ever ran out of enough mana that he could no longer use his magic to fight, he now had a weapon that could carry on by itself without needing him to power it. He may not have known how much use it would see in the end, but it didn't matter. It would be a comfort to have on him, and it had been enjoyable to create, so with one done, he made more to fill up his rings while the time passed. Voidstone really is too much fun. I'm gonna need to bother Jake again soon so I can make more. His friend's fate sealed by Ben's greed, he made a mental note to go bother the other summoned whenever he had the chance in the future, but from there went on with his work while the day went by. Well, don't you look happy? Ben teased, even as Thera strongly denied it. Of course I'm not, she told him, trying to control her face. Do you really think I'd be happy just because I have an official excuse to avoid helping out at the hospital for a while? No matter how constantly draining and exhausting it is, it's important work. I was actually assuming it was because you finally get to do a rank 1 quest. Something you want to get off your chest there, Thera? She slumped over as he asked, looking all the more tired for it. Ben, you're clever. Please do me a favor and put that freaky brain of yours to work figuring out how to awaken more life and light mages. Pretty sure you don't ask for favors while calling someone's brain freaky. Let me try again. Using your completely normal, not at all unnatural mind, please save me by awakening more of the planet's healers. Somehow the lack of sincerity hurts even more, but what's the problem currently? Weren't the mana bracelets I distributed to everyone helping? MMH, they were and they are, but this work is never ending, she complained. Everyone is still getting hurt all of the time to the point that any day I need for something else. Everyone I work with ends up on the edge of tears with how much more that means they're all gonna have to do, and as handy as your new tool is, the fact that it hurts to use doesn't exactly leave it as an enjoyable option no matter how much it helps. It feels like I'm drowning every time I go off to work. MMH. Kind of sounds like you guys need to unionize. You can't unionize every light and life mage on the planet. Why not? Leverage that collective bargaining power as the only people who can keep everyone from dying en masse. Break off from the Mages Guild and start your own. I think the Healers Guild has a pretty good ring to it. Okay. But that sounds like a multi-year project that would be completely impossible to pull off in the middle of a war. The much easier alternative would be to turn to my very smart, very caring boyfriend and hope that he'd be able to find a solution. All I'm looking for is only 100 new awakened mages. That really isn't some small ask, but I'll at least think on it, even if it isn't going to be my area of expertise. As both this world's awakener and great teacher, I suppose it's the least I can do. Yes, let those and any other useful titles go to your head so you can solve this for me, she joked, feeling better with his agreement to try. The sooner we get more healers, the sooner I can take more days off to work on other things, guilt-free. How could I even force any levels in those branches, though? He muttered to himself, seriously considering the problem. They're both non-physical, so I can't force any materializations to make it work, and trying to force groups of 9th-level mages to take on their respective towers to get the gods to awaken them mostly just runs the risk of killing off some of the world's better healers. That really just leaves trying to force them to constantly use complex spells until they break that barrier themselves, and with my mana bracelets and the constant work they've already been put through, then you'd expect some to awaken on their own eventually anyway, so what does that leave? I suppose I could suggest to the gods that a new hospital be set up with every mage at the 9th level of those affinities acting as the staff. From there, divert all of the most extremely injured to work it and get Yuzu to visit often enough that she could constantly lower their awakening limits. No, there's a better option. I could help Falk build an enchantment to place on any such building as a whole to help reduce the awakening limits for the people in it, and I could just supply however much mana crystal or souls to ensure they'd always be fully powered, which actually feels like a decent idea for awakening people. I just need to convince the gods it would be worth it. Okay. I can at least bring it up. Not like it would do any harm. The genuine version of this novel can be found on another site. Support the author by reading it there. The small strategy that had formed in his head as a way to potentially eventually help awaken some healers made it all the more clear how lucky the planet had been to get a soulsmith when it did, as Ben continued to think of more ways his teacher might be able to help while also considering options without him, putting a few minds to the task as they went. Thera slipping her arm around his as they did. Have I ever mentioned that trying to solve the impossible for me is a very attractive quality? Man, do I really seem so easy to butter up? Sometimes. Alright, well, like I said, I'll work on it. Either when we're done with this or we get a small break, I'll talk to Myriad about the first idea, but for now, feeling a bit more excited about the quest. A bit, she admitted as they finally arrived at the Gate Network, only moments from their meeting place for it. It sounds like it could be interesting, even if a bit underwhelming. True. They were to be watchers more than participants as they judged the results of whatever group they were following, and while that made for a unique quest, it didn't mean it would be an exciting one, with Ben having an issue besides that. He hadn't finished his job. He had to be close, basically right on the edge with the way he'd been pushing himself in the last few days. He just hadn't been able to cross the finish line of it. Even then, he was making more souls with the spare mana he had, keeping enough for himself to prevent his total from getting too low in case there were any emergencies, but still chipping away, hoping that each one he'd make would be the last as he continued to not get it, with that meaning he'd be back to his coat, pushing with all he had the instant that quest was done. Which also means a non-zero chance of damaging my soul again, even with the bandfolk made me. He sighed as they went through the gate they needed to the Untamed Lands. But not getting it done until after my mass job run is scheduled would be so infinitely worse. If I hurt myself a bit, then I can just get my dear teacher to fix me up so I can finally finish the stupid thing, and then I basically never need to worry about overstraining my soul to this extent again. I just need to put in the work for a little longer. With the taste of freedom on his lips, he couldn't help but spend just a little more mana on his soul creation as the two looked around the area. The place filled with teams of adventurers and soldiers who'd be going out to patrol the lands for what demons had escaped to the unpopulated sections of the world as they tried to find the group they were meant to meet, with Thera seeing the sign for them first. "Oh, you can't be serious," she groaned, forcing Ben's eyes to where she was looking. "I changed my mind. Any bit of excitement I was feeling is gone. Ugh. Let's just get this over with. Maybe it won't be so bad." Ben tried to encourage, feeling himself fail to get any positivity across. There's no possible way that anything involving her isn't going to somehow be a nightmare. Thera sighed, but with the quest already accepted, there was nothing they could do, leaving the two to walk over to a small crowd, with the great life spirit Vividus standing at the front of it. As they walked over, Thera's eyes were locked on her aunt while Ben couldn't help but take in the crowd around her. All of them appearing at first glance to be from the same species, or at least hybrids that shared a similar paternal heritage, with that assumption only falling through as he looked at their souls as well, the skills they held telling a different story for the group they were no doubt sent to observe. He had questions to ask from it all, but they were put briefly on hold as they made their way to the one who seemed to have been responsible for their presence there, waiting to the side as the Great Spirit exchanged words with the only other person who didn't match the rest and only stopping their talk as she took notice of them. Child, what brings you here?" Vividus asked as she took note of Thera's presence, with Thera nearly grinding her teeth in return. "You called for me, of course I'm here, though I probably wouldn't have been if I'd known you were the one who sent out the request." "Oh, are you and your little pet the ones the guild sent?" "It didn't matter to me who I got, so I didn't ask, although I suppose I do remember hearing you were working with them and you have finally made yourself useful enough to get that rank." Actually, with the mana you're giving off, I'd say you've finally begun to go past being just an acceptable standard," the Great Spirit muttered at the end as she appraised her niece, thoughts indecipherable running through the ancient being's head. "Just what are your magic levels currently anyway? What's it matter? I am currently your employer. It isn't too much to ask." A sharp breath as Thera tried to keep from swearing at her aunt then and there before she finally answered. "Spiritual life is 9, Earth is 7, Dark is 4, and my non-affinity is 2. Don't ask about the rest of my status, that's my business." Ben could see the answer had perked up the one Vividus had been talking to as well, while the Great Spirit only smiled wider. "And from the feel of it, your mana has reached a good volume as well. If you've gotten better at using it on a larger scale, then I'd go so far as to say you've actually managed to make something of yourself." Well done, I suppose." The small congratulations managed to catch Thera off guard enough that it paused her bad mood, leaving her to sigh after a beat of silence as she looked around. So then, are these the people we're expected to observe? They are. Unfortunately, I don't currently have the time to examine how they perform in the field myself, as another one of my more floundering projects requires my attention, so I do hope you'll be able to help produce a decent report on their performance for me. And what exactly is so special about them? They're constructs modeled after your little lover. What? Chimeras, Ben answered before the spirit could. But more than that. Each one of them holds either the skill partial homunculus body or integrated homunculus body. You turn people into chimeras using artificially constructed life to modify them. Very good, Vividus clapped. And correct. Seeing the improvements to your base biology after your own modifications made for an interesting project, but as decent as what you produced had ended up being, I knew I could go much, much farther. Of course, the main difficulty had been finding a way to bind a homunculized flesh to a person in a way that would produce the necessary skill to yield the best results, but thankfully I had plenty of experimental material. It may not have made up for their crimes yet, but Ibaru and his like have been making excellent test subjects. Ensure your favorite authors get the support they deserve. Read this novel on the original website. The statement made Ben whip his head to the crowd, searching to see if he could find the old head of Craftsman's Tower among them. It was obvious that among all the modifications Vividus had done to them, one had been stripping them of their skin and replacing it with something new, with every test subject there having a scaled appearance that was mixed between a dark purple, orange, and green, but he didn't know to what extent they'd been changed, so he couldn't know if they'd even have the same facial structure to try and identify them. Even as he looked though, Vividus just chuckled. Oh, you won't find him or any of his cohort there. I have plenty of other tests to run on them, so they'll remain at my home. No, these were all ethically sourced volunteers, each of them looking to get stronger as I reached out my hand to them. How could you have possibly gotten so many volunteers to be experimented on? Thera asked, a question Ben couldn't help but wonder himself. Counting heads, Ben could make out 50 of them, all people who'd supposedly agreed to be put through such a thing. To be so heavily modified that they wouldn't be recognizable to even the people they held most dear, with that seeming to be the crux of the matter. People who have nothing left make for easy subjects to work with, the spirit told them indifferently. Having lost home, family, and friends, there were plenty who wanted the strength to fight back. All I did was offer it to them. You took advantage of people while they were at their lowest, Thera muttered, shaking her head in disbelief. Infinite hells, Viv. I always knew you were a monster, but this is... She didn't even know what to say. Words couldn't properly express her disgust. After unending weeks of trying to help everyone she could through clinic work, her aunt had instead put her incredible life magic towards doing that. There was no reaction she could give that would fit what she was feeling, even with the spirit appearing entirely indifferent. All I did was give them a choice. The fact that they took it was up to them. Ben could feel Thera wanting to yell at his side, but he took her hand before she could, trying to help her keep her cool while he spoke up, aiming to keep track of the practical. So to what extent have they been altered? It's not just their flesh, is it? Finally, a decent question. No, while their skin was remade to the best of my abilities, producing something that is far stronger and more resilient while also creating energy for them through exposure to the sun and heat in general, you'll find every part of them modified to one extent or another. Their bones and muscles have been improved with my designs incorporated into what they already had, and while I didn't replace too many of their organs if I could avoid it, I have adjusted their systems and included new ones I've especially designed myself. These people are my masterpieces. Again, he could feel Thera wanting to say something, but there was nothing that would come from turning it into a fight as Ben asked a question that had grown in him with the explanation. If you've modified them to such an extreme extent, how can they possibly still be listed as having that as their partial or integrated bodies? It sounds like you've changed them nearly in their entirety. Only around 35% for each one, she said, sounding proud of her achievement. It just so happens that the efficiency I was able to pull it off with exists on a far higher level than base biology. You'd be surprised how many unnecessary flourishes exist in a standard race due to the messy process that is evolution, and the gods of every people I've seen didn't do much to improve upon it outside of the changes they needed to make to uplift their believers. Everything I've created, however, exists at peak efficiency, and seeing as how what I created should be able to breed into the gene pool thanks to the system interaction creating those skills, I go so far as to say that so long as we win in the end, in the long term I've improved every race on the planet. So nice knowing I have a megalomaniac in the family, Thera finally said. So what? If they prove their efficiency, you're going to expand production on them? Of course. So long as the results are what I expect, I'll be offering my services to every group on the planet, she said lightly. And no matter how you might feel on the matter, I'm expecting an honest and accurate evaluation. Thera was silent at that, knowing she'd do the job she'd been given but not wanting to give her aunt whatever satisfaction she'd get from outright saying it. Not that she had to. The Great Spirit had her expectations, and even if the two of them left out of protest, they weren't the only adventurers who'd come to do such a thing, a fact made clear as she turned away. Ah, it seems the last group has finally joined us. In that case, let's have a quick talk so I can be on my way. Vividus led them over to the final group to join them, Thera elbowing him the moment she saw one of the party, with Ben immediately understanding why. Having both blue skin and silver eyes, it was another one of Yuzu's race, meaning he wasn't going to be the only summoned on that expedition. Ben felt that man's eyes on him in return, noticing that same fact although he tried to ignore it. They'd be working together for a bit, it seemed, but he had no reason to try and get close, even if what he was seeing made him curious. A wielder of both space and death magic, he was the only one in his party of 5 to have any awakened skills, meaning the others with him seemed to have been pulled along for the quest because of him alone. Which wasn't to say they were bad either. All of them held high levels of first-tier skills that made them a decent match and provided good party coverage as far as he could see it, with only one other point drawing his attention. The rest of the party was entirely female. While nothing against that, Ben was reminded of Zilly's reaction to both Yuzu's wedding and the thought that he might have been sent to woo her and Nadi, seeming firmly against anything less than monogamy in a way she seemed to imply was the standard for their race, with memories he'd seen in her head more or less confirming it. Yet from the minds he was peeking into, he could tell that there was some sort of physical or romantic element between the party that went beyond any common friendship, telling him that Yuzu alone wasn't the only one willing to buck her people's customs to take what she wanted. In the end, though, it didn't matter. As soon as Vividus began addressing them, he gave her his full attention for whatever instruction they were to receive. Good. Now that you're all here, let's begin. I'll make this short. My Chimera Corp will be fighting the demons to their fullest ability, while the rest of you observe and compare how they fare against what you'd expect of any other force. You may of course step in to assist in the event the situation looks too dangerous, but otherwise be as hands-off as possible. With that said, Phone here will be in charge of directing you all. If there's any issues, you're all to turn to him and listen to his instructions. She nodded to the man she'd been talking to when they'd arrived, a three-eyed Oni who Ben actually recognized as someone he and Thera had helped recently, being a holder of both an awakened mace-wielding as well as an awakened lightning magic who'd received his own homunculi to use in his training. Not that he seemed to have recognized them. There was no sign of those clones around either, leaving him to assume he'd chosen to leave them behind given the details of their quest. Still, he looked older than anyone else and likely had the experience to back up his current position as leader, and neither he nor the rest were going to argue it, least of all to their current employer. As she went on, as for where you'll be going, Phone will be directing the Space Mage, but given you'll be going after 5 moving swarms, if for whatever reason you can't find one of the groups, then so be it, but in general I'd prefer you to search the best you can to claim whatever results are available. With all of that said, I have my own work to do, so I'll let you all be on your way. When you're done, simply submit your reports to whatever guild is convenient, though if it could be one on the Gate Network that would be preferable. From here I'll yield the floor. Saying all she'd needed to, Vividus walked away without looking back, leaving things to Phone as he looked around them. Alright, you all heard the boss, so I expect us to work together for the next couple days. Any personal issues you might have or might spring up in that time can be left until our work is done. For now though, I'd like an idea of what we're working with while we're together, so if everyone could at least give their names and key skills so we can know how we can rely on one another should an emergency crop up. Let's start with you. He nodded to Thera, leaving her to speak up. Did you know this text is from a different site? Read the official version to support the creator. Thera with awakened life, earth, dark, and non-affinity magics. Though it's the first two I'm most proficient in. And I trust whatever issue you have with our quest issuer won't affect our work or ability to work together. It won't. Finding it was her was an unfortunate shock, but I'm able to be professional otherwise. Phone nodded, accepting the answer and turning to Ben next. And yourself. That brought the question of how much Ben wanted to say to people he'd never work with again once the quest was done, ending on only the few skills he thought might matter. Hey, I'm Ben. With an awakened crafting, enchanting, and material manipulation. The answer got him a curious look, with Phone not outright dismissing the use of his first two skills, even if he chose to focus on the final. I'm not familiar with material manipulation. Does it have any combat applications? It's a non-affinity magic skill, Ben explained, materializing a blank book for emphasis. It can be used for what it says in the name, manipulating materials, up to and including using it for materialization. Should I need to fight at all, I'll be able to hold my own. Don't worry. Phone nodded once more, looking satisfied as he turned to the rest, with the other summons speaking first. Pato with a space and death magic, but I know I was brought on mainly for the first. Still, I'll be able to get us around without any issues, and if it comes to a fight I can play my part. Good. And I believe I heard you were the only member of your party with an awakened skill, correct? That's right, but the rest are fully competent. More so than myself in many cases. I have no intention of discounting them for whatever skills they have, I just wish to be clear for the other two. We all need a decent understanding of one another to ensure this goes smoothly. Now, if you all would. Galda and specialized in archery and tracking. The first one with at least a partially elven heritage said, while the others spoke up as well. Both with a focus on spearsmanship. A Gorgon woman told them, that fact being plain enough from the weapon she held. Twee and a water mage, the third woman stated, by all appearance looking like they were a cross between a Jotun and an aquatic race of some sort, with the height and silvery white hair of the first while also possessing gills along her neck, telling Ben she was likely semi-aquatic and made him wonder what the story was there. He also couldn't help but notice the brace on her arm to control the passive ice magic she possessed from one of her paternal races, but ignored it to focus instead on the final member of that party. Being part of a race he couldn't identify but undoubtedly left her with some complex bloodline of various peoples, leaving her bald with what he'd describe as sickly pale skin if he was seeing it on his own race, along with eyes akin to Thera or Pato's, only a solid red as she gave her answer. He already knew what she had from peeking at her status, though, and it couldn't help but draw his curiosity as she spoke up. Azizal, with my main skills being corpse song and unarmed combat, though the first is my specialty. Once more Phone asked for clarification, the new skill a mystery to him, even if Ben had heard of it before. Corpse song. A non-affinity branch that lets me see the life of the dead I find, she clarified. Although it needs to be recent, anything older than a few days is too much for me. It was a skill that Zandale possessed too, but that was Ben's first time meeting a natural holder of it, leaving him to appraise the group. A frontline fighter, a tracker, someone who seemed to be able to help in both of those two as well, with the backline in the form of two mages and the tracker having their bow. In all it was a balanced group, surely able to handle most quests thrown their way, and it made him interested to see if he'd get a chance to watch how they'd operate, though he kept his expectations in check. Other than the fact that it seemed Pato was acting as their transport, that group was there for the same reason as he was, and with introductions made it seemed it was time to get started. Satisfied now that they had a grasp of what they could expect from each other, Phone turned to the people they'd been sent to watch, speaking up for all of them. We'll be heading out now, so keep it orderly when the portal opens. Pato will be heading north for the first while. With a nod, the otherworlder did as he was asked, tearing open a hole in space and letting the group go through.